Story 1.
Caught my wife cheating, snuck into her motel room, captured it all, and served divorce papers. My name is Jonathan. I've never felt such intense anger in my life before this. Anger is something no one should ever experience. At that moment, I had a strong urge to physically do bad things to people. You might be wondering what caused this rage in me. Let me explain. It all began about 5 weeks ago when my wife and I noticed a significant change in her behavior. Like a chameleon's transformation, she started showing a lack of closeness, even in the usual actions between a husband and wife. This sudden change made me suspicious, as my past experiences with my ex-girlfriend had taught me some tough lessons about trust and truth. Interestingly, I had never mentioned the first girl in my life before, and I doubted that revealing it would have made any difference. As her behavior continued to change, in the second week, I felt the need to investigate further. Unlike those who seek outside help for their problems, I'm not someone who relies on others. I prefer to solve my problems on my own. So, during my lunch break, I discreetly followed her from work. To my surprise, she parked at a motel and entered room 104. My gut told me she was cheating on me. It didn't make sense because her job didn't involve client interactions, and she worked in the accounting department. Discovering her infidelity hurt, but not as much as the emotional stress I'd already endured from her insults and rejections. The person she was having an affair with turned out to be a colleague. Even though they worked in different departments, there were rumors that he was moving up the ranks in the company. For 2 weeks, I thought about various ways to solve the problem. Eventually, I decided on a direct approach to avoid spending money confirming what I already suspected. I waited patiently for the moment I knew she was with another man behind that door. Despite the strong temptation to confront her violently, I reminded myself not to resort to cruelty. My main goal was to gather evidence. In my current emotional state, I still had the option to take legal action for the loss of love, which would have serious consequences for both my wife and her employer. I had a feeling that the man she was involved with was on the brink of a downfall, and events would unfold accordingly. My main task was to gather the necessary evidence and serve divorce papers to my soon-to-be ex-wife. At the same time, the locks in our house were being changed by a locksmith I had hired earlier. I'd also organized our finances for an equal division and canceled all our credit cards. The past 2 weeks were filled with preparations, and the final shock was approaching. As for Simone's reaction, I can't predict it with certainty. I believe she will find happiness and may eventually feel guilty. My lawyer, experienced in divorce cases, assures me that this guilt will fade once she has her own lawyer. Regarding my feelings for her, one might wonder if I still love her. At the moment, I feel nothing but hatred for her. Yet, I struggle internally, wondering if she genuinely loves me or if her actions are a mistake. In resolving the issue, I have a faint hope of restoring our relationship, but logically, I know it's unlikely. I can't accept a wife who betrayed my trust through infidelity. My confidence in her is completely shattered, and the love I still have for her is a remnant struggling to cope with this rapid change. The motel manager gave me the room key after I handed him a $1,100 bill and promised not to disturb the peace. Even though my wife and her lover chose this place for their secret meetings, I don't blame the manager. He seems like a genuinely nice person. Interestingly, he mentioned his ex-wife, and there were certain similarities in our situations. I quietly opened the door with the key, entered the room, and left it slightly ajar. I grabbed a digital camera, thankful for receiving it as a birthday gift 3 months ago. I admired its quality but was quickly captivated by the scene before me. She was pleading with the man to let her go, and he was visibly angry as he tried to get up. I decided to capture the evidence, taking a few more pictures as I witnessed her suffering. Simone had tears streaming down her face, trying to hide from him while he continued his disgusting actions. I mentally wished that he would make the wrong move so my instincts would guide my actions. He demanded to know my identity and warned of physical confrontation. I replied that I was the soon-to-be ex-husband of the woman he was having an affair with. It remained uncertain whose face would be punched. I doubted he could do bad things to me. As he approached me, I shifted to the side, gently put the camera down, and turned slightly to the right to let him approach from the left. Loosening my grip on the camera, I began to turn quickly, raising my hand forcefully. When my fist met his face, he was lifted off the ground by a mix of anger, pain, and trembling. At that moment, I couldn't believe I'd let myself get so needlessly angry, but it seemed like my emotions had overwhelmed my rational thinking. I bent down and checked if he showed any signs of life. When I found a pulse, I felt relieved, which allowed me to relax my tense body for a moment. During this time, I heard Simone talking incessantly. Her words filled the air around us. When I looked at her, I saw that she had suddenly stopped, her voice now muted by fear. It dawned on me that she had never seen this side of me before, this raw and unrestrained version of myself that had been unleashed. I must have looked nothing like the person she saw at breakfast. It was clear that she had betrayed me, and I didn't want anything to do with her cheating anymore. Tears rolled down her face as she sat trembling, hugging herself tightly and avoiding eye contact. She couldn't bring herself to meet my gaze. This behavior had become more common lately, but in that moment she realized I knew about her actions. The game was up. I noticed a flicker of fear in her eyes when she glanced at me, but she quickly looked away. I informed her that I was filing for divorce, changing the locks in the house, and setting up a bank account with her share of our property. I had given her official notice, making it clear that our relationship was over, and I expressed my gratitude for her lack of contribution. I placed the papers on her lap as she tried to hide under the sheets. She briefly glanced at them and then met my eyes. No words were exchanged in that moment. An unusual emptiness filled the room, but it was clear that my emptiness would be more painful. She realized that no words could mend the situation between us. It seemed she didn't know how to fix our broken relationship, and it had been deteriorating for longer than just the last few weeks. I turned and left, despite her desperate pleas echoing behind me as I walked out the door. "Wait! Let me explain! Please, Jonathan, please!" I kept walking, deciding to shield myself from her gaze. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears, and I knew that turning around would weaken my resolve and disrupt my plan. Numerous unresolved issues and problems had cropped up along the way, making me reluctant to revisit the past. What was once a beautiful union had turned to ashes. When I arrived home, a patient locksmith was waiting for me. He diligently replaced all 3 locks on our doors and reprogrammed the garage door opener. I thanked him for his prompt service and slipped him a $120 bill as a token of appreciation. Sitting at the kitchen table, a place that used to hold fond memories of a loving home, I reflected on the years spent together. Simone's abrupt change remained a mystery to me, as did her disregard for the qualities she had once acknowledged in me. I couldn't grasp her motivations, but I knew our relationship had crumbled in just 5 weeks. Pain and hurtful words had transformed me into a completely different person. Unfortunately, Simone seemed oblivious to this change, just as I had been unaware of her changes. Suddenly, the phone interrupted my thoughts. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was Simone's mom. I answered and greeted her. I identified myself as JN. To my surprise, Simone's mother, Doris, told me that Simone had come to her in tears, confessing that she had somehow ruined our marriage. Curious, I responded. I explained to Doris that the situation was a bit complicated and that Simone would need to explain what happened. I mentioned that I had found her in a motel room and served her with divorce papers. Doris expressed her confusion and said she didn't understand what was happening between us. I conveyed my genuine sorrow to Doris, telling her that I cared a great deal about her and Sam and that this situation was undoubtedly tough for all of us. I also mentioned that it seemed things had to turn out this way. Tears welled up as I spoke these words. I held a deep affection for Simone's parents, who had shown me kindness throughout the years of our relationship. Doris's anguish and confusion cut through me. I was relieved that we were having this conversation over the phone. I didn't want them to see me like this. I responded to Doris, expressing my doubts about finding a way to work things out. I continued by emphasizing to Doris that this was a serious issue, a really serious one. The gravity of the situation was causing a rift, and the silence on the other end of the phone suggested she was having a hard time processing this distressing information. I felt empathy for her. Just the previous night, I had shared dinner with Doris, Sam, and Simone had been affectionate and gentle in the presence of her parents. The entire situation had taken me by surprise. When we were driving there, we were arguing. On the way back home, I encountered a distant attitude from Simone, which wasn't surprising. During the time we spent with Doris and Sam, we portrayed ourselves as the perfect couple to spare Sam from the pain caused by our issues. In hindsight, I should have somehow warned them before taking the steps I did. Sam's health was already fragile due to years of hard work and smoking, which had taken a toll on him. Although Doris was in good health, she was constantly worried about Sam. I deeply regret not letting them know about our troubled situation. A few days later, I received a call from Simone's father, who explained that he needed to discuss something important about his daughter's troubled relationship. He mentioned that Simone had confided in her mother the previous night, and that he had been present during their conversation. He asked if we could arrange a meeting to discuss what she had gone through. Due to my strong affection for Simone's parents, I readily agreed to the meeting. During our conversation, Simone's father shared the details of her conversation with her mother and relayed it to me. He expressed his regrets about me serving her with divorce papers and requested that Simone provide more details about what had transpired. He felt that simply stating that I found her in a motel room wasn't sufficient. He wanted to understand why she was there and who she was with. Simone began explaining, saying that our relationship had deteriorated compared to when we first got married, primarily due to my overwhelming workload with numerous projects. She had discussed this issue with her mother, who believed that my hard work would eventually lead to a well-deserved promotion. Simone continued, revealing that there was more to the story. At her workplace, Greg, a colleague, had discovered a few mistakes she made in the employee records. While these weren't major errors, they were significant enough to jeopardize her chances of a promotion, a salary increase, and her advancement in the company. Exploiting the situation, Greg essentially blackmailed her into having a physical encounter with him. Despite her reluctance, she decided to take that step to avoid the consequences of her mistake. This was a result of our ongoing relationship difficulties and the lack of closeness over the last 6 months. Simone also explained that it was only after that first encounter with Greg that she realized her eagerness to experience what others had already enjoyed. I had been her only partner, and she'd never been with anyone else. She detailed the first physical moment with Greg, which took place in his office during a lunch break. Everyone else had left, and she stayed behind. Greg surprised her with a small bottle of her favorite wine along with cheese and crackers. She noted that typically lunch breaks lasted an hour, and everyone would go to nearby restaurants or street vendors for food. However, she preferred a quick snack from a food cart and going to the park, and surprisingly no one noticed their absence. Simone shared that Greg turned out to be much kinder than her initial impression of him as a stern blackmailer. This meeting marked a turning point for her, causing her to let go of her preconceived notions about him. Although she knew it was morally wrong, she found herself desiring more of those forbidden moments. While she still loved her husband, Greg treated her in a way that made her feel like his possession. And with him, she shed her inhibitions and became a completely different person. By the end of lunch, she was engaging in things with Greg that she hadn't even considered with me. They barely wrapped things up before others returned. As she left his office, her anger towards him had somewhat dissipated. That day, with the taste of him on her lips, she couldn't shake the thought of their next encounter. This thought came unexpectedly. Recognizing her desire for Greg, he also desired more than just a one-time encounter. The next day, Greg approached her to discuss it, and they had another physical moment in his office. During that encounter, Simone noticed that Greg spoke negatively about me. These subtle insults continued for the following 2 weeks when they were together, and Greg even suggested that I might be unfaithful, given the situation in our personal life at home. It didn't take long for Simone to adopt Greg's negative view of me in the weeks that followed. Simone noticed herself starting to criticize and belittle me in front of everyone except for her parents. Deep down, she was afraid that they would catch on to her behavior, so she tried to keep up the appearance of a devoted and loving wife when they were around. But as time passed and her meetings at the motel became more frequent, her relationship with me deteriorated, while her relationship with Greg transformed from a simple affair into a full-blown romance. Greg suggested continuing our meetings at the motel as a temporary solution until we found a better option. He explained that his wife was becoming suspicious, possibly because someone at work mentioned how often we were seen together, even though we worked in different departments. There was no talk of parting from our spouses. Our meetings were purely for physical closeness. Looking back, I failed to recognize the love, respect, and understanding that Jonathan offered me. I chose a relationship based on attraction and desire over the emotional connection I had with my husband. I surrendered myself to Greg without much resistance. Jonathan always treated me with respect, never taking anything without my full consent. Greg, on the other hand, had no emotional attachment to me, allowing him to take control freely. He had a compartment where he satisfied his desires, and his wife provided emotional support. I took Greg's negative comments about Jonathan seriously, which led me to prefer an exciting physical relationship with Greg over nurturing an emotional connection with my husband. Looking back, I realized that 10 weeks ago I made the gravest mistake of my life, and sadly, it's no longer possible to undo it. When Jonathan entered the room on that fateful day, I was shocked and tried to hide. Desperately, I pleaded with Greg to stop, but when Greg finally stepped back and left the bed, I looked into Jonathan's eyes and saw a complete stranger in him. His behavior was tense and unusual. Without saying a word, Jonathan began taking pictures of us, and Greg, muttering something unintelligible, carelessly placed the digital camera on the nearby table. I was completely shocked by what happened next. Greg, consumed by anger, aggressively attacked Jonathan, but moments later I saw Greg thrown into the air and collapsing on his back. I met Jonathan's eyes, and shame overwhelmed me, making it impossible to maintain eye contact. I tried to shield myself from the situation, covering myself with a sheet in an attempt to hide. At that moment, Jonathan used hurtful words, calling me corrupt, and casually placed several folded papers on the bed. In the midst of all this chaos, I heard that I had been served with divorce papers. My eyes remained fixed on the sheets, and I couldn't grasp that my husband's anger would soon be directed at me. Fear and humiliation coursed through my veins, making me tremble and feel vulnerable. Filled with shame and regret, Jonathan abruptly turned and headed for the exit, clutching the camera he took from the table. Desperately, I tried to reach out to him, but I was in tears. Although I don't recall the exact words, I felt that everything I said sounded empty. After this unpleasant encounter, I took a long shower, completely ignoring Greg's well-being. At that moment, it didn't matter to me whether he was alive or not. Soon, the motel manager peered into the room and said that Jonathan had purchased a key from him. The manager's disdainful look made me feel like I was beneath him. He spoke about how he found his wife with another man, much like my situation with Jonathan, and that was the main reason he gave Jonathan the key. He didn't need to explain it directly. I understood everything. I had made a colossal mistake. I foolishly lost the most precious thing in my life because I got carried away by a fleeting affair, believing it was something extraordinary. The next day, I went to work, and 3 men were waiting for me in my office: the president, the HR manager, and what I assumed was the company's lawyer. They wanted to avoid legal problems, so they offered me a settlement and let me go. It was an unpleasant situation, but at least it was over. Greg and I no longer communicated after that. It became clear that our relationship was built on deception and manipulation. I learned a tough lesson and vowed never to let anyone take advantage of me like that again. When I left the office, I felt a sense of relief. I might have lost my job, but I had regained my self-respect. From that day on, I resolved to be more cautious and selective about the people I allowed into my life. As for Greg, he would forever serve as a painful reminder of a chapter in my life that I was glad to leave behind. I received a severance package, and that was it. Greg was escorted out of the building by security and handed over to the police. It turned out he was involved in several other serious cases that came to light during the investigation. Greg had significant legal problems, including theft from the company through various means such as embezzlement and falsifying business trip receipts. These actions added up to a grand theft charge. As a result, Greg's wife decided to leave him. After a difficult decision, she moved with their 3 children to her parents on the East Coast. Meanwhile, Greg remained in jail awaiting trial. Initially, I was asked to testify, but after discussions with the district attorney's office, it was clear that my testimony could do more harm than good. So they decided not to involve me in the trial. Afterward, Greg's attorney approached me, seeking my testimony to support his client. However, as I recounted the details of how Greg had coerced me into a physical relationship and manipulated my marriage, the attorney also concluded that my testimony wouldn't be helpful in court. Simone expressed her regret, saying, "Mom, I can't believe I messed up like this." Her mother responded sternly, telling Simone that she had made an incredibly serious mistake. She explained that Simone had not only let down her parents and herself, but had also betrayed her husband, hitting rock bottom. Despite all this, her mother conveyed that she still loved Simone because she was her daughter, but she had lost all respect for her. Sam told me that Doris and he had allowed Simone to stay with them. His voice carried a tone of complete confusion. Hearing this news brought tears to my eyes. I felt for these genuinely good people who found themselves entangled in this unfortunate situation. In retrospect, I had hesitated to inform Simone's parents because I knew it might lead to her getting a warning that could hinder me from gathering the necessary evidence. However, the photos I had didn't hold the key to the court case unless her lawyer decided to take an adversarial approach. In that scenario, I had 6 reliable witnesses prepared to testify about their involvement. Although I used the term affair cautiously, it remained unclear whether Simone genuinely loved this man or if she willingly engaged in this situation from the very start. This ambiguity was connected to her father's previous remarks, suggesting that Greg had a certain level of influence over Simone right from the beginning of their relationship. Meanwhile, my attorney was handling the case with Simone's employer. As I got ready for a visit to the motel room, my lawyer had already filed the case in court. Surprisingly, within just 20 minutes, he was on the phone with the company's legal department. Their response was mixed, initially delighted and then in denial. Naturally, the conversation took a different turn when he mentioned the affidavit. Suddenly, the company's stance on the issue shifted completely. Based on the information my lawyer shared, it was highly likely that Simone, her lover, and all others involved would be dismissed from their jobs the next day, unless they could provide a reasonable explanation for their actions. I personally understood that the case against Greg for alienation of affection had significantly strengthened due to his employer's response. We had affidavits from 3 of his colleagues and 1 from her, all attesting to their clandestine activities during work hours. The company's higher-ups had suspected their actions in secret but hadn't confronted them. We had sworn statements from the motel owner and the cleaning lady, totaling 6 witnesses. Additionally, I had photographic evidence confirming physical activity during work hours. Their motel visits were to avoid drawing the attention of colleagues, as Greg noticed their behavior was becoming too conspicuous. He was well-versed in the company's workplace relations policy. My attorney gathered a substantial amount of information, and we even had a printed copy of their company's ethics and workplace relations policy. It was during this time that I discovered Simone's affair, which had lasted just over 5 weeks before I became suspicious. By the time I encountered them at the motel, Simone had been unfaithful to me for 10 weeks. The revelation of their affair 5 weeks prior was an incredibly challenging period in my life and one of 3 similar moments that stirred strong emotions in me. I genuinely hoped I'd never go through such an experience again. When I left the motel room that day, I felt a sense of calm like I had never felt before. Simone lay on the bed, tears streaming down her face, while Greg remained unconscious on the floor. In the hallway, the motel manager approached me as he handed me the key. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's tough now, but it will get better. Take time to rediscover yourself and eventually you'll find someone new," he comforted me. "Everything will be okay." He didn't sugarcoat it, acknowledging that the healing process would be painful and depend on the depth of my love and care for her. "Thank you," I responded, indicating that I had already come to understand this. Simone offered no resistance during the divorce process, making it surprisingly straightforward. Even my attorney, and possibly hers, were surprised by her lack of opposition. It was clear that she was in great pain, but she never attempted to justify her actions. Once the divorce was finalized, the legal battle with her former employer swiftly concluded. Their sole aim was to make me disappear, and they were willing to cover my lawyer's fees, court costs, and even offer a significant sum to secure my agreement. But since then, Simone has faced numerous challenges. Navigating her circumstances is incredibly difficult, especially living with parents whose lives have been greatly affected by her actions. She bears the burden of seeing herself as an imposter, and it will undoubtedly take her a long time to shed that label. Although she has the opportunity to start anew, I hope that eventually she'll be able to move forward and rebuild her life, easing the pain that currently consumes her every hour. I want her to at least learn a valuable and painful lesson from this experience. Only time will tell the extent of her growth. As for Greg, his imprisonment provides me with a sense of satisfaction, at least temporarily. Maybe now he'll have the opportunity to experience different forms of closeness, hopefully this time from the recipient's side. I can't find any sympathy for him because I don't consider him a real man. It was clear to me that he had a family, a wife, and 3 children. I got to know his wife closely during a tumultuous divorce, and I couldn't help but notice her striking appearance. It struck me how foolishly Greg was behaving. He had everything anyone could wish for, but he recklessly threw it all away, driven by some insatiable desire for satisfaction in his personal life that his wife couldn't fulfill. After witnessing this, I made a difficult decision to leave my job. My employers were shocked by my abrupt departure and genuinely tried to persuade me to reconsider. However, the personal problems I was facing were too serious and hindered me from effectively continuing my work. Despite their best efforts, when they realized my decision was final, they kindly provided a generous letter of recommendation, which I gratefully accepted. I recently started a new job on the West Coast, having moved here about a year ago. While working here, I had the pleasure of meeting a wonderful woman who, in my opinion, is worth holding on to. Though I still have trust issues, we share a common experience, as she was also betrayed by her ex-husband. This shared experience has created a strong bond between us. Life, of course, presents its challenges and teaches me valuable lessons, but I remain optimistic that the situation is gradually improving. A week ago, Simone's father called me with devastating news that I still can't come to terms with. He said that Simone had completely lost her way, and they soon discovered Simone's lifeless body in their own home. It later came to light that she had taken too many pills, resulting in her passing. I expressed my sympathy to Sam and assured him they could count on my support.
Story 2.
Husband discovered his wife's cheating video online, got epic revenge, and completely ghosted her. My husband caught me arm in arm with another man in public and attacked him. Then I went home and did this. I was careless and incredibly stupid to cheat on my marriage. The consequences I faced after my husband caught me having an affair outside our relationship were cruel and evil. I didn't realize I'd been married to someone so awful for years. I genuinely believed he was kind and loving, but it turns out I was mistaken. Have you ever found yourself in a situation you never imagined? I won't deny I was wrong for what I did because I was, and I suffered greatly for it. I never imagined I would find myself in such a humiliating situation one day. I really don't know what led me to another man's arms and why I made that selfish and destructive decision. My husband's only fault was loving and caring for me. Sometimes being a housewife gets dull, but I was content because my husband supported me financially. If I were to explain why I cheated, you probably wouldn't believe or understand, but I think it was greed and desire that drove me to betray my husband. I had everything I needed, and my husband ensured I lacked nothing, even sexually. Instead of staying loyal, I chose to betray my marriage and seek satisfaction elsewhere. But the aftermath of my wrongdoing wasn't pleasant, and he ensured that I regretted every single action I ever took against him in our marriage. My husband, Jim Carson, age 32, and I, also 32, crossed paths at an Atlanta radio station. He appeared at the station for an interview regarding his remarkable real estate and construction enterprise. Besides, he generously supported several nursing homes and children's homes in Georgia, particularly in Atlanta. His philanthropic work was truly remarkable. I was the radio personality conducting his interview at the time. Following the interview, it coincided with my shift ending. Just to note, I hosted the evening drive from 6 p.m. to 9:00 p.m. After wrapping up my duties, I requested him to wait as I intended to seek sponsorship for my non-governmental organization, NGO. We briefly discussed my NGO and he handed me his business card, suggesting I reach out during business hours. I accepted the card, but I had no desire to engage with anyone else but him. Therefore, the next day, I dialed the number on the card and conveyed my request, subsequently securing an appointment to meet with Jim. 2 days later, I attended the meeting with Jim, where we discussed my aspirations and the community's needs, along with my earnest desire for sponsorship. From that point on, we swapped numbers. He shared his plans for phone conversations, and I was beyond thrilled. Our chats over the phone brought us gradually closer. A few weeks in, he generously covered my phone bill, drawing us even nearer. Later, he extended his generosity to my NGO, filling me with joy. He once escorted me to the orphanage he supported, showcasing his exceptional contributions. What struck me about Jim was his grounded nature. He dedicated himself to aiding others, driven purely by passion, not by the urge to showcase on social media. His actions were genuine, avoiding the spotlight of social media. His approach demonstrated that he engaged in these acts out of pure love, capturing moments with children and their caregivers without ever flaunting them online. So, whatever he was up to, sure, he snapped photos with the kids and their caregivers or nurses, but you'd never spot a single one of his actions on social media. He convinced me that if you're going to help someone, you should do it with a heart that's truly open and pure. Never help someone only to snap photos and show off your deeds all over the internet. His modesty and commitment to aiding others really touched me. Months down the line, we grew closer. He became a trusted advisor whenever I felt confused or needed advice. I knew he was there for me, no questions asked. I had someone I could rely on, someone to share everything with, whether it troubled me or brought me joy. He would brainstorm with me, figuring out solutions for my NGO, and I cherished every moment spent with him. You know how it feels when someone really gets who you are? Just a few months after meeting, that was Jim for me. He understood me completely, inside and out. From our friendship days up to our marriage, I learned so much. Jim is incredibly intelligent, bursting with talents, and has an amazing mind. He's got a sharp eye for business, which I really admire because he relentlessly pursues his plans and dreams. We were friends for over 7 months, and that period was a golden chance for me to really get to know Jim. Eventually, we started dating. We became inseparable, often visiting the places he supported and lending a hand to those in need. After making our relationship official, we reveled in the joy of dating for a few months until he proposed on February 14th. I can't pretend I wasn't over the moon because I truly was ecstatic. It felt like all my dreams had come true. I mean, I had found my soulmate, my guide, my best friend. I had discovered the perfect match in Jim, and I couldn't imagine wanting anyone else. He was my everything. We tied the knot during the summer break in June, making me the happiest woman alive. Our marriage was pure joy. I had all I ever wanted, a husband who was loving, caring, and supportive. A few months into our marriage, Jim and I discussed starting a family. I was eager to build our own little world with him. However, Jim suggested I take an early retirement to ensure I was well rested and my body ready for pregnancy. I trusted that stepping back from my job meant Jim would take care of me completely. I was already receiving a generous allowance from him just for being his wife, no longer needing my salary, since he was covering all our financial needs. I wanted for nothing, enjoying intimacy, care, Jim's time, and his undivided attention. Yet I found myself wondering why I felt the need to lead a double life when I had everything from Jim and more. As time went on, staying at home began to feel monotonous. Jim was always tied up with his job, especially since his construction business took off, landing more projects than ever. They were swamped with work, given they specialized in building construction. While I was thrilled to see my husband's business thriving since it meant a boost in our income, it started to strain our connection. Our conversations seemed to revolve solely around his work, and the numerous projects his company was tackling. Honestly, it got pretty dull at times because work dominated our discussions. Even during dinner, he talked about the next big project, or the homes he needed to remodel for his real estate venture. Jim is incredibly focused and hardworking, but there were moments when I really missed him. I longed for his affection, his humor, and just being with him. One day, out of sheer boredom and seeking some excitement, I found myself downloading a dating app. I was craving some genuine connection and intimacy, something beyond my own company. As I swiped through profiles, one particular man caught my eye, Eric Mayer, a 33-year-old with striking features. His profile pictures showcased his slim, well-defined physique, fair skin, and captivating green eyes. Just glancing at his photos sent a thrill through me. Wow, I thought. Not long after, Eric messaged me, and we hit it off instantly through the app. Our conversations flowed effortlessly as if we'd been friends for years. There was undeniable chemistry between us, a real sense of connection. After chatting for a few days, we exchanged numbers and began texting through a popular messaging app, even moving on to video calls. Well, not just normal video calls, but those nasty and freaky video calls. The ease with which we communicated made it feel like we were building something special. I had convinced myself that Eric was the one meant for me. Our desires aligned perfectly, and our connection was indescribable. As weeks flew by, Eric and I managed to meet up twice, and each encounter left me more enthralled than the last. His presence was electrifying. It's not that my husband lacked passion, but his constant busyness left a void. His occasional financial support and sporadic kisses couldn't fill the gap of deep, exciting intimacy I yearned for. I craved someone who could transport me to another dimension, to experience euphoria beyond my wildest dreams. Jim, caught up in his world, was absent from mine, prompting me to seek fulfillment with Eric. He ensured my complete satisfaction, guiding me to peaks of bliss I hadn't known before. Our affair took root from these moments, evolving into something undeniable. By our third meeting, we were insatiable, drawn to each other with an intensity that overshadowed everything else. Caught in the thrill, I navigated a double life, torn between my love for my husband and the exhilarating escapades with Eric. My heart belonged to Jim, but Eric's touch ignited a fire within me that I couldn't resist, leading me down a path of secrecy and dual existence. This clandestine affair had been unfolding for months, shrouded in a web of lies and deceit. I was acutely aware that if Jim ever discovered it, the fallout would be catastrophic. My actions were undeniably selfish and driven by greed, with my liaison with Eric centered purely around the physical connection we shared. Though emotions were entangled in this affair, my heart could never belong to Eric as it did to Jim. In our recklessness, Eric and I failed to consider the potential repercussions, lost in our private world of passion. Eric had a way of making me feel valued, showering me with the time and attention I craved. Meanwhile, I understood that Jim's relentless work ethic was fueled by his desire to provide a comfortable life for us, ensuring that he could care for me without any financial burdens. On a day that would forever mark a turning point, Eric and I were meandering through the park, wishfully ensconced in our own world, oblivious to the approach of my husband Jim from the opposite direction. As we rounded a bend, there he stood, a portrait of shock and betrayal. His initial shock rapidly morphed into fury as he confronted us, deeply wounded and enraged by my infidelity. His anger was palpable, far surpassing mere rage, and in his tumultuous state he directed his fury towards Eric, sparking a physical confrontation that left us all rattled and mortified. I was at a loss for words, fully aware that any attempt to explain would only fuel his anger. In a desperate bid to defuse the situation, I tried to pull Jim away from Eric, but the conflict escalated. Onlookers gathered, drawn to the spectacle as if it were a public performance. Jim, driven by an unstoppable fury, seemed beyond reach. My efforts to intervene only resulted in me accidentally catching a blow. When bystanders realized the intensity of Jim's assault, they stepped in to break up the fight. Eric fought back, but Jim's strength was overwhelming. The power he exhibited was unlike anything I had witnessed before. Attempting to calm the storm, I uttered the cliché defense of the guilty. But Jim dismissed me with a look that chilled my bones, indicating I would find him at home before departing. In the aftermath of the turmoil, we all went our separate ways, the air thick with tension, and my heart heavy with guilt. The journey home was a solemn one, filled with dread and contemplation of the irreparable damage done. My mind kept pondering what awaited me at home, and I felt apprehensive about returning, especially knowing Jim was still angry, despite my fear of facing him. I knew I had to confront the situation to move forward. I hoped he would believe my lie and forgive me. I didn't want to lose my husband over a brief affair and desires. However, sometimes hopes remain just that, hopes. Upon entering our empty house, the reality of the recent events hit me hard. I was shocked to find smoke emanating from the car garage. I feared Jim might have harmed himself, so I hurried to the source of the smoke. In the garage, I saw Jim holding all the new clothes I had purchased with his money, setting them ablaze. Despite my pleas for him to stop and attempts to intervene, he slapped me and ordered me to gather my old clothes and leave his house. I couldn't believe Jim's actions. Admittedly, I wronged Jim in a deeply hurtful way, and my actions were indeed inexcusable. However, his response was beyond what I believed was justified. His confrontation with Eric was one thing, but to destroy my clothes simply because he had purchased them crossed a line. I had naively thought that the destruction of my wardrobe might quench his rage. Little did I realize the head of our household had plans to take his retribution further. Actions far more severe than a mere bonfire of my belongings. In the days that followed, I retreated to my old apartment, a place I had called home during my days working at the radio station. I honored Jim's demand for me to leave our shared home, but the emotional toll was immense. To describe my state as merely heartbroken does not capture the depth of my despair. I was utterly devastated, left with nothing but ill-fitting attire from my past. My situation seemed grim. In my solitude, I managed to gather some basic groceries, enough to sustain me for a few days, harboring a sliver of hope that Jim's anger might subside and there could be a chance to mend our fractured marriage. The absence of Jim left a void in my heart, emphasizing how incomplete my life felt without him. A month into my solitude, my landlord approached me for the monthly rent. Despite my prolonged wait for a call from Jim, a call that never came, I had reached out to him countless times, flooding his phone with messages and calls, clinging to the hope that he might respond. To the landlord, I promised I would retrieve the rent money after a quick trip to the shops. At the grocery store, after selecting all the necessary items, my confidence plummeted at the checkout. The moment of truth turned into a nightmare as my card was declined repeatedly. In desperation, I tried other cards, only to face the same humiliating outcome. Venturing to an ATM provided no relief, offering only a useless slip in return. The situation grew increasingly mortifying, not just for me, but for the line of impatient customers behind me, all delayed by my futile attempts to access my funds. For what felt like an eternity, I made a bold decision to head straight to the bank branch to unravel the mystery behind why my money wasn't flowing from any of my cards. Upon arrival, I sought assistance and was hit with the most jaw-dropping news imaginable. The bank informed me that my accounts were bone dry, and worse yet, the one Jim had opened for me was flagged as fraudulent. I was in utter disbelief. Picture this: I had no food in the apartment, rent unpaid, my life was essentially in shambles. Jim had single-handedly wreaked havoc on my existence, all because of an affair I had with Eric. The cruelest twist of all was that Jim had manipulated the situation to leave me destitute, with no financial support. He had cut off every means I had to survive, leaving me with nothing. I felt helpless and ashamed. I had brought this upon myself, but Jim's revenge was far beyond what I had anticipated. He wanted to make sure I paid for my betrayal, and he succeeded in every way. In my despair, I realized I had no choice but to return home. I phoned my mom, desperate for help, but she wasn't around. Luckily, she wired me some cash, just enough to get me from Georgia to Virginia Highland. My heart was in tatters, and thoughts of the worst crossed my mind, but the mere thought of my mother's pain stopped me. She was deeply disappointed in me when she learned the truth about Jim and me. She questioned me once, but I couldn't muster the courage to give her the real story. Instead, I fed her lies, unable to admit what truly happened in my marriage. I suspect she reached out to Jim seeking the truth because a day after my deceit, she stormed into my room, fury etched on her face. She was livid and let down, demanding to know why I strayed from my marriage, parading my affair in public while knowing Jim's constant travels for business. I knew my actions would have consequences, but I never anticipated the magnitude of the fallout. My life was shattered, a swift reckoning that felt like karma arriving sooner than expected. I inflicted the worst pain on Jim, but did he have to retaliate like this? I retreated to my room for months, grappling with the wreckage of my marriage. 2 weeks into my stay at home, a postman dropped off an envelope right on my doorstep and I was utterly shocked. I had been holding on to a sliver of hope that Jim might snap out of it, especially since he hadn't sent over any divorce papers. Turns out, he had waited all this time, making sure I was at my lowest before sending those divorce papers. It broke me into pieces. I felt so low, not even wanting to step outside. All I yearned for was to vanish, to find a corner of the world where nobody knew my name. I holed up inside for months until I realized it was time to pick up the pieces. Thankfully, my mom was there for me, finding me a therapist who dedicated heaps of time to help me talk through the mess of my marriage. It wasn't easy, but after 2 weeks, her patience paid off. I finally started talking, and with that, I began to release the weight of my past, aiming my sights on what's ahead. In a moment of real clarity, I recognized it was time to own up to my part in everything and confront the consequences my actions had on my life. A couple of weeks into my journey back to myself, I was piecing my life back together bit by bit. I realized that to truly move forward, I needed to start with forgiving myself and Jim. So I sat in my room and penned down a sincere letter to my husband, expressing my deep regret and seeking his forgiveness. I acknowledged my mistakes. I had been blinded by greed and desires that led me down the wrong path. It was a lot to process, but I was determined to tackle it step by step and embrace life fully. I even started applying for positions at various radio stations, hopeful that my experience and tenure at the Atlanta radio station would tip the scales in my favor and secure me a spot. My mom was my pillar of strength and the support I desperately needed. She's irreplaceable, my anchor and protector. She instilled in me the belief that things would turn around and I would find healing in time. My split from Jim had left me in ruins. I doubted I could ever rise again, yet with divine strength I found myself standing taller than before. Now, what I owe myself is to forgive Jim for the upheaval in my life. I'm ready to move on, yet there's a part of me that still yearns for Jim, holding me back. I'm at a loss on how to approach Jim about this. I could use some guidance on this matter. Please help me, because I really don't know how I can approach Jim. Please advise me on this one. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned, and let's dive in. The moment Lisa walked through the door, I looked at her and just knew. I sensed that my wife had cheated. She had said she had to work late, and maybe she did, but somehow I felt she did more than work. How did I know? Some of it was just intuition, and some was the way she looked and acted when she came home that night, nervous and uneasy. Lisa was terrible at hiding her feelings. Unlike her, I'm good at keeping a poker face, so I didn't let on that I suspected my wife of 5 years had done anything wrong. Instead, I hired a private investigator because I wanted proof. Lisa and I were both 27 years old. We met in college during our senior year and dated for 2 years before getting married. I thought we shared the same values, including total fidelity to each other. Before we got married, I made it clear that cheating was a deal breaker for me. Sadly, until now, I believed we had a perfect life together. I'm not the type of guy who focuses solely on his career and ignores his wife. On the contrary, I always showed her affection by buying her flowers and gifts, taking her out on dates, and ensuring our bed life was satisfying because I have a high sex drive. People have told me I'm good-looking and I work out to stay in shape. Sure, I have my flaws, but neglecting. My wife isn't one of them. Lisa might not be what some would call a knockout, but she's pretty with a nice figure. Her breasts aren't large, but they're not small either, and she has curves in the right places. Lisa works as a paralegal for a prestigious law firm. Usually, she's home at the end of the workday, but occasionally she has to work late on important cases. I work in the high-tech field and earn a good income. Lisa comes from a well-off family. Her dad owns a big ranch in Texas with oil. He wanted us to sign a prenup. It said that if we divorced, our pre-marriage assets couldn't be touched, and any family inheritance would also be exempt. Since I wasn't marrying her for money, I didn't mind signing. I never liked her dad because he was racist, always saying bad things about blacks and Mexicans. But I didn't see that in Lisa, and since we lived far from them and didn't spend much time with them, it was okay. The private investigator I hired was recommended by a friend who used him to catch his cheating wife. My friend was impressed with how well he worked. The day after I started suspecting something was wrong, I went to the PI's office and told him what I needed. Once he agreed and I paid him, he started working on the case. It took a few days after what I thought was her first time cheating for my wife to go back to acting normal. I kept acting like a loving husband, and she probably thought she got away with it. Exactly a week later, she said she had to work late again. I called the PI to let him know. When she got home, she looked a little guilty, but not as bad as the first time. She was probably getting used to the idea that I wouldn't find out and she could do what she wanted. The next day, the investigator called me and confirmed my suspicions. She was having sex with some guy from her workplace right in the offices after everyone else had left for the day. Apparently, he took some photos through the window from a building across the street, but they weren't very clear. He asked me if I wanted him to keep investigating, and I asked if he could get video evidence. He said it could be done, but it would cost more. I wasn't short on money, so I told him to go ahead and do it. Meanwhile, I got sick with a stomach virus, which I used as an excuse to avoid having sex with my wife, or at least that's what I told Lisa. I just hoped I hadn't already caught an STD from her. Then I put my plan into action. One of my hobbies is playing poker. I'd meet up with friends maybe once a month for a game. I usually did pretty well, so I figured I wasn't too bad for an amateur. I also played poker online, nothing too high stakes, just games with a $5 or $10 buy-in. We had saved up a nest egg of over 200 grand, and since I'd contributed the most, I didn't want Lisa to get any of it. That's where online poker came in. With my knowledge and skills, I set up 5 untraceable accounts on a poker site. I worked through all the accounts that belonged to me so I could play against myself in one-on-one matches and intentionally lose. Sure, I lost some money to the site's rake, but it was less than what Lisa would get in a divorce. It seemed less suspicious to lose our money to 5 different players than just one. The site I used wasn't based in the US, so they were unlikely to share any client information. It took a week, but by then I had emptied our bank accounts, leaving only 10 grand. Exactly 1 week later, Lisa called again, claiming she had to work late. I informed the private investigator, and he assured me he had it under control. When my wife returned home this time, there was barely any sign of guilt. She was becoming skilled at cheating. The next morning, the investigator called to say he had what I needed. I went to his office and picked up the DVD. He offered to provide a written report in a couple of days, but I told him the DVD would suffice. I paid him for his services and said I would reach out if I needed anything else. He expressed sympathy for the situation, but I reassured him that he had nothing to apologize for. He wasn't the one being cheated on. With the DVD in hand, I returned to work, locking myself in my office and instructing my assistant not to disturb me. I realized I wasn't anxious when I pressed play. Honestly, I already knew she was cheating on me, so watching the video wouldn't change anything. It seemed the video was filmed with a hidden camera in the law office, with clear picture and sound quality. I didn't want to know how the PI managed it, I just cared that I got what I wanted. Although I hadn't met the man my wife was involved with, the PI provided me with a lot of details about him. I knew he was married with 2 kids, his parents' identity, his hometown, and where he attended church with his family. What I didn't know and only discovered from the video was that he was black. Now I know what you might be thinking. She was after a well-endowed black man. However, when I saw him, I noticed he wasn't any more well-endowed than me, maybe even slightly smaller. I watched the video without feeling anything. I had already lost all emotions for her. I've heard of guys in my situation becoming emotional wrecks, wanting to understand why their wives did what they did. Personally, I didn't care. She did it, and that's all that mattered to me. I really didn't care about the reasons behind it. One thing I did notice was that neither of them mentioned me or his wife while they were together. The sex wasn't particularly interesting. The only thing that stood out was them criticizing the partners of the law firm. Interesting. After watching the video, I went to my boss and explained that I needed a week off for personal reasons. We were pretty close, so I gave him a brief overview of what was going on and asked for his help in covering for me. I mentioned that I needed to leave town for a few days. He understood, having experienced his own ex-wife's infidelity 2 years ago, and was very supportive. He suggested an idea to make my absence legitimate without using vacation time. He gave me a list of out-of-state customers that he thought it would be beneficial for me to visit. This way, I had a valid reason to be away, and I didn't have to dip into my vacation days. I left work early, packed a suitcase, and called my wife. I informed her that one of our out-of-state clients had a major computer system emergency, requiring me to travel immediately. While occasional business trips weren't unusual, they weren't frequent either. She expressed her love and said she'd miss me, urging me to return soon. I simply replied that I had to hurry to catch my flight. I'm not sure if she noticed that I didn't tell her I loved her back. I took a flight out of state and started the next phase of my plan. I made several copies of the video and put them in mailers, addressing them to various people. To distance myself from them, I sent them overnight to an old college friend on the East Coast. I called and asked him for a favor, telling him he'd receive a box for next-day delivery. All he had to do was open it, take each mailer, and drop them in the mail. To show where they were sent from, I was halfway across the country with witnesses confirming my location and that I was working. I know it sounds a bit secretive, and if things went as I expected, it might have been excessive. But I wanted to ensure what I was doing couldn't be traced back to me. I sent a video to every person I could find who worked for Lisa's law firm. Others were sent to the man's wife, parents, and pastor. One was sent to my wife's parents and their church's preacher, along with copies to all her old friends and our current ones. Some guys might be embarrassed to have their friends know their wives cheated on them, not me. She was the one who broke her vows and betrayed me. I was the innocent victim. The final one arrived at my home address for me. Each video came with a list of amateur sites where I had anonymously posted it for everyone to see. By Thursday, things started to go downhill. I don't have all the details, but my wife and her lover were called into their boss's office, shown the video, and promptly fired. Then my wife began getting calls from friends who had seen the video. Her dad called, screaming at her over the phone, and told her never to contact him or her mother again. On Friday, a couple of our friends called my mobile, asking about the videos. I told them I was away working and had no idea what they were talking about. They filled me in on what was going on. It was comforting to know that some of my friends were more loyal than my cheating wife. I phoned home, and a very nervous Lisa answered. I informed her about the calls from our friends regarding the video. Then I said I was heading to the airport to fly home, and that if the rumors were true, she should be gone by the time I arrived, and she should get a lawyer. She was gone when I got home, leaving with only a few clothes. Later, I learned she was staying with a divorced friend who had been unfaithful. I contacted a lawyer and initiated the divorce proceedings. I informed Lisa that I never wanted to see her again, and the only communication between us would be through our lawyers. Lisa's lawyer wasn't very reputable. After our situation became public, most lawyers avoided her. It seems her former employer had spread the word that she was unwelcome. When I stated our assets were 10 grand, she was furious. However, I had enough proof to show that I had lost the rest through gambling, and I did so before discovering her infidelity. Our only other asset was the house, but due to the housing market decline, we would lose money if we sold it. We had only lived there for 3 years, but Lisa didn't grasp that and obtained a court order to sell the house and split the proceeds. I wasn't bothered, as I didn't plan to stay in the house, and she couldn't afford the mortgage without a job. I had to pay 8 grand to settle the mortgage after the sale, leaving our net worth at 2 grand. She also filed for alimony. The final decision was that she was responsible for not having a job, even though she was capable of working, so alimony was refused. I handed her a check for $1,000, but she owed more than that to her lawyer. She had ruined her own situation, and now she was shattered, practically without any friends, and with no family to rely on. She also realized she wouldn't find work in our city again since the scandal was widely known. She had no option but to relocate out of state. I threatened to sue Lisa's former employer, arguing they should have been aware of the affair between 2 employees who were married to others, especially as it occurred during work hours in their offices. We settled for $300,000, which they paid willingly to put an end to the mess. They didn't want any more negative publicity damaging their reputation further. I withdrew my funds from the online poker site and recovered most of my money. With the settlement from the law firm, I ended up in a good financial position. I would have given up everything to still have a loving and loyal wife, but I couldn't change the situation. What I do know about Lisa in recent years is that she works as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. It seems that whenever she applied for a better job, a copy of her infamous video would mysteriously surface at the company she applied to. I suppose a wife who cheats in the office while on the clock and speaks negatively about her employers doesn't fare well on her resume. As for me, well, I have a few female friends with benefits. I might consider getting married again, who knows? Both my parents and grandparents have had successful, long-lasting marriages. Maybe I'll be fortunate enough to meet the right woman. Of course, I'll make sure she understands my stance on cheating, even though it didn't work out well with Lisa and me.
Story 3.
Steve Jones sat on the rear patio, gazing at the sunset over the ocean. He mused that they should have relocated here ages ago. The allure and serenity of this spot were enchanting. Here refers to a small island off the north coast of Cornwall. Throughout their 22-year marriage, Steve's wife, Claire, persistently suggested, persuaded, and eventually convinced him to move from London to this place, where she and her family had deep roots. Improved transportation and technology, along with COVID, finally enabled him to work remotely enough to make the move feasible. With visits to the city limited to once a month, Claire, who still lived in London, regularly returned to the island to reconnect with family, friends, and, most importantly, her mother. They purchased the house from Claire's cousin 2 years prior, but only made the move 6 months ago. In the interim, Claire utilized her visits to undertake repairs and use it as a home base. Following the completion of extensive construction, the house now faced west, overlooking the bay, offering Steve a breathtaking sunset view as he enjoyed a refreshing beer. Originally a farm, the property retained nearby meadows and orchards, with signs of recent tree planting, likely part of Claire's landscaping efforts the prior spring. Trees and orchards appeared to be prevalent across the island, prompting Steve to ponder whether they served to shield against the brisk sea winds or, more likely, to yield the beloved cider cherished by locals. He conceded it was a wise decision. Claire had been right. Life on the island operated at a distinct pace, revolving around tight-knit circles, many of which comprised Claire's relatives. Claire reveled in her return home, seemingly acquainted with everyone on the island. As an outsider, Steve perceived a certain aloofness from the locals, yet he appreciated their direct mannerisms. The collective unity displayed by everyone impressed him, leading him to speculate whether it stemmed from the self-reliance essential for a small island community's survival. Steve and Claire crossed paths at university, both pursuing degrees in business. Claire focused on marketing, while Steve delved into new technologies. Their bond blossomed, culminating in marriage shortly after graduation, with a mutual decision to settle in London for enhanced career prospects. Though married for 22 years, Steve still finds Claire stunning. While her hair gradually shortened, now styled in a pulled-back fashion with a touch of golden hue accentuating her natural blonde locks, he noticed her concern over the slight weight gain she experienced over the years. However, he cherished the subtle changes in her physique, her silhouette becoming fuller, her hips and bust embracing a more pronounced curve. Her eyes retained their familiar hue, blue-gray with specks of yellow in the irises. Unlike Steve, she never appeared disheveled or opted for sweatpants, maintaining a timeless appearance. He had never witnessed his wife so elated, fully immersed in island life and actively engaged in various committee endeavors. Her current undertaking involved coordinating a solstice festival. Their daughters, Nicole and Michelle, arrived shortly after their wedding, grew up, and pursued studies at Durham University, a factor influencing Steve and Claire's decision to relocate. Based on their social media activity, the girls seemed to be relishing university experiences to the fullest. Despite Nicole's penchant for procrastination, Steve remained confident they had ample time to complete all necessary tasks. He found solace in the island's history, often indulging in evenings at the local pub, listening intently to age-old fishing tales. Several antiquated books chronicled the island's history, housed within a small schoolhouse doubling as a library and village hall for social gatherings. Surveying the attic of their home for the first time, Steve hoped to uncover more insights into the island's past. Amongst the aged beds, furniture, and toys, he stumbled upon a weathered box containing a handwritten manuscript titled Tales from the Island, authored by Melissa Taylor, his wife's maiden name. Seating himself on a wicker stool, he perused the manuscript, admiring the elegant, swirling script detailing a blend of ancestral stories and personal experiences. Illustrations of trees captured Steve's interest as he skimmed through the faded yet evocative text, piecing together fragments of the narrative. The tradition's origins trace back to 1287, during the Plantagenet era, when the law of the first night, also known as jus primae noctis, became part of marriage licenses. Under this law, the ruling lord held the right to spend the initial night with any newlywed bride within his domain. Steve recalled a similar concept from the William Wallace movie featuring Mel Gibson, though he suspected it to be a myth adopted by Hollywood for added intrigue. As he delved deeper into the text, Steve learned of the groom's anguish caused by this practice. To preempt any potential retaliation, elder women spent a night with the groom, eventually evolving to one of the senior women sharing the groom's bed to ensure fairness for the couple. For 2.5 centuries, the plague ravaged English society, decimating populations, including on the island. Following a severe outbreak in 1622, concerns arose regarding the island's viability, leading to serious contemplation of its abandonment. Following these events, rumors circulated regarding partner swaps on April Fool's Day, linked to efforts to populate the island. Widows were encouraged to seek companionship among younger men. With the onset of the Great War, nearly all island men enlisted in the British Army's ranks. Many never returned, prompting adjustments to the island's customs to provide unmarried men heading to war with surrogate partners before conscription. This practice resurfaced, albeit to a lesser extent during World War II. The narrative then transitions to Melissa's experiences in the 1950s. Despite challenges like the influx of outsiders and displacement of locals, the tradition persists in certain families. Elders staunchly defend its value as a cultural practice. Married women who've raised children offer surrogacy to 18-year-old men, easing concerns about pureness loss and imparting marital wisdom. Divorce remains rare on the island. This tradition also mitigates adolescent pregnancies seen as communal service with rewards after years of child-rearing. It curbs empty nest syndrome and extramarital affairs. Melissa recounts her own surrogacy for an 18-year-old named Robert when she was 46, while her husband focused on business. Robert's reward for planting trees during the festival was time in Melissa's marital bed, symbolizing renewal. The text suggests that Melissa's husband was aware of the arrangement, but never broached the subject. She observed Robert's evolution from a timid adolescent to a confident man. Their initial encounter was brief and awkward, but Melissa provided comfort, gradually fostering closeness. Throughout the week, Robert's skills and self-assurance flourished. Melissa not only addressed physical aspects, but also conveyed her desires, emotions, and relationship dynamics. Steve marveled at the remarkable tale, pondering its authenticity. While historical references lent credence, the narrative seemed improbable. It could either be the author's creative invention or a means to justify her narrative. Months later, Steve contemplated his return to the city for work. With Claire's extensive shopping list, he opted to extend his trip by a day to reconnect with old friends. Timing his departure after the festival, he aimed to be back by the following Saturday. Claire welcomed the news, anticipating Steve's assistance with festival preparations and his willingness to tackle her shopping tasks. The festival day engaged the entire island, featuring children's games and sports during the day and evening festivities with dancing and drinks for adults. As the evening program commenced, Steve met some islanders he hadn't encountered before, including John Fraser, his wife Angela, and their son Jake, who seemed close in age to Steve's youngest daughter. Jake's formal handshake struck Steve as odd, but the moment passed quickly. Among the island's oldest families alongside the Taylors, the Frasers, Steve once again felt like an outsider. While Claire and the Frasers delved into familial connections later that evening, Steve noticed a group of young men casting admiring glances at Claire. He couldn't blame them. She looked stunning in her chosen summer dress, highlighting her ample bosom and shapely legs. Their persistent looks began to irk Steve. Just as he was about to intervene, Claire's mother intervened first, ushering them all back to the cider bar. Steve chuckled inwardly, noting the wariness the young men seemed to have toward Claire's mom. Diana, however, commanded respect, a formidable figure and leader of the Council of Elders. It was clear where Claire inherited her striking looks. Diana Taylor remained a striking woman, more akin to Claire's older sister than her mother. He returned to watch the dancing, which engaged people of all ages. Steve felt the cider's effects, but decided he could handle more. Everyone seemed to share the same mood, making it a challenge for him to serve himself. Upon his return, he realized Claire was missing and began scanning the area. To his surprise, he found her conversing with Jake Fraser, who had moved away as Steve approached. "What's going on?" Steve inquired. "Jake is interested in landscaping work. I was discussing options and costs," Claire explained. "Do we have work for him?" "Yes, and there's a tradition of planting and rejuvenating trees around the festival time, so it's perfect." The mention of trees triggered memories of a manuscript Steve had recently read. "So Jake will be planting trees?" "Yes, he can start next week." Claire observed Steve's reaction. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Steve replied slowly. "What will Jake receive in return?" "Money, of course, but we haven't settled on the amount yet." "Will there be other arrangements besides payment for his services? What are you implying?" Steve pressed. "So this has nothing to do with the island's traditions?" Claire retorted sharply. "What traditions? You know about the solstice tradition. Are you insinuating I'm planning to have an affair with Jake Fraser while you're away next week?" Claire broke into tears and fled, leaving Steve in shock. He started to doubt himself. What if he had wrongly accused Claire? He regretted drinking so much. His thoughts were muddled, making it hard to think clearly. He began ascending the narrow road toward their house, hoping a walk would clear his mind. It felt like the longest walk of his life. Perhaps he had misunderstood something or overreacted to the situation. Upon reaching home, Claire was nowhere to be found. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the sofa, succumbing to drinks and fatigue-induced sleep. The following morning, Claire still hadn't returned, leading Steve to suspect she might have spent the night with her lover. However, he suspected she was with her mother, a suspicion confirmed when Claire and Diana arrived at the door. Diana took charge of the conversation, berating Steve for upsetting Claire and insinuating he was never good enough for her. It was a barrage of words, difficult to keep track of, but the underlying message was clear. How dare he treat Claire that way? He listened quietly as Claire spoke, her eyes glistening with tears. Eventually, unable to endure it any longer, he raised his hand to halt her mother. "I have a straightforward question. Is there indeed such a tradition? And are you intending to sleep with Jake Fraser next week?" Claire turned to her mother with a defeated expression, and everything clicked into place for Steve. "Yes, Steve. Some old families still observe the tradition, or at least a part of it. The Frasers have requested its enactment, and we are obligated to adhere to it. I asked Claire to consider it. It encompasses everything related to a boy's coming of age. It's about education regarding how to treat women respectfully. It's not what you would consider lovemaking, nor is it an affair. This tradition, centuries old, has aided the island in surviving tough times. It's a vital societal obligation that we fulfill. It's the reason we have low youth crime rates, no divorces, just happy, tightly knit families. I'm sure you've noticed that yourself, Steve, he sighed. So it's all true. Married women are entertaining eager young men for the greater good, Diana retorted. Let's not be crass. You're an outsider and don't grasp the significance of this to us. It's deeply ingrained in every story we hear growing up here. If you were from here, you'd receive the same benefits at 18, making you a better man. I doubt you'd turn down such an offer, Steve. Nowadays, there aren't any ancient laws, plagues, or wars driving this. You do it because you find pleasure in it. Diana, care to share how many times you've fulfilled this role? With your charm, you've likely been sought after for numerous executions of the agreement. I imagine you've had quite a bit of enjoyment for weeks. Diana appeared momentarily speechless, but quickly regained her composure. Yes, I've fulfilled my obligations several times, and I take pride in it, just as you should be proud of Claire's sacrifice. Please, Steve, allow Claire to proceed. You can't grasp how significant this is to us. Steve turned to his wife. So, you're willing to do this? I believe so. I'm prepared to make this sacrifice. Like my mother said, I want to become integrated into society. My departure for university and marriage left many unhappy, as I didn't return here or fulfill the responsibilities others carried. Steve interjected, So, this is a sacrifice? Wasn't this something you desired yourself? It seems odd given how elated you were about my move to London. You seemed thrilled. Claire blushed, then continued. I simply felt relieved that I could handle everything without affecting you, and I'm confident it won't affect me. I'm absolutely certain it won't impact our relationship in any way. Besides, engaging in closeness with another man, deceiving others, being aware of what occurred, and keeping your oblivious husband unaware. Maybe you're onto something. Claire and Diana winced at Steve's sardonic reply. Then Diana intervened. Why don't we all take some time to cool off and discuss everything, now that everything is out in the open, as it should be, and nothing has transpired yet? Claire remained at their residence, but communication between them was sparse. Steve couldn't comprehend why Claire was considering going through with this. He anticipated her abandoning the idea, yet she appeared fixated on the island's tradition, regardless of its impact on their relationship. Claire insisted that transparency would improve things. She vowed to be forthcoming with Steve, even if it led to challenging discussions. Steve found himself somewhat taken aback by Claire's unwavering confidence and insistence that such an arrangement wouldn't impact their relationship. Diana returned on Wednesday while Claire was out, leading Steve to suspect they had privately agreed upon a meeting time. Can we have a talk, Steve? Steve gestured toward the kitchen table, and they both sat down. Firstly, I want to apologize. This shouldn't have occurred, and it's my responsibility, not Claire's, Steve responded. Claire is fully capable of making her own choices, and it seems this decision has already been made. Despite my reservations, she loves you deeply and believes strongly in your ability as a couple to navigate this, Steve replied somberly. Yet neither of you seem to grasp how deeply this affects me. It's a genuine betrayal. When I was 18, I wasn't here, and unlike everyone else, I didn't live my life with the understanding that this could happen to my wife. I understand, Steve, and it must be incredibly challenging. It's hard to convey how differently we view this. We don't perceive it as infidelity. It holds significant importance to us, and Claire sees it as a means to reintegrate into the island community. After a brief silence, Diana continued, What will you do if she agrees to this? Steve sighed, reluctant to voice his thoughts, but did so nonetheless. I won't tolerate it. Diana appeared to ponder the situation before speaking again. What if there's a way to balance things out? Perhaps giving you the opportunity to experience what you missed when you were 18. Steve must have looked as bewildered as he felt. Diana continued, I spoke with 2 other elders, and we reached an agreement that the elders would extend to you a similar arrangement as Claire's. Suddenly, a realization dawned on Steve. Are you proposing that I engage in carnal relations with Helen Brown or Moira Fraser? Memories of meeting these 2 women flooded Steve's mind. Helen, a widow from a young age, whom Steve presumed to be around his wife's age. With her long black hair and deep brown eyes, she maintained a slender figure and was undeniably attractive. Steve didn't know Moira Fraser well, but he knew she was happily married and related to the other Frasers. As the headmistress of a small school, Moira boasted reddish-blonde curly hair and a graceful figure, often showcasing ample cleavage. Steve lifted his gaze from his memories. Yes, Steve, the elders are open to offering this, demonstrating the significance of this to us. Claire's involvement was not taken lightly. Despite the apparent temptation, Steve found the entire proposal ludicrous. You're an exceptional woman, Diana, and also an elder. Aren't you also included in this arrangement? Diana hesitated, unsure if Steve was serious. If that's what you require, Steve, then yes, I consent. I won't be the one responsible for forsaking centuries-old traditions. Steve shook his head, astonished by Diana's willingness to go to such lengths. He dreaded having to explain this arrangement to his father and the authorities. You know, Diana, some traditions have overstayed their welcome, and it's appropriate that they fade away, Steve remarked. Diana's smile vanished. Our offer remains, Steve, and you won't regret it. I can assure you of that. Think it over carefully. When Steve recounted the incident to Claire, she already seemed aware of the elder's proposition, but Diana's involvement left her shocked and in tears. I never imagined she would consider this. It's all too much. I won't go through with it, Steve. This has to stop. Steve felt a wave of relief, finally acknowledging how bizarre the whole situation was. Thank goodness. I can't express how relieved I am. Claire cried and spent most of the night either apologizing or reiterating her love for Steve. The situation remained awkward and uncertain, with Steve still grappling with Claire's earlier intentions and her belief that the proposal was reasonable. On Friday, Diana returned, visibly angry about Claire's change of heart, accusing Steve of being a manipulative outsider who could never understand her. Steve grew weary of the accusations. Why don't you be honest, Diana, and admit that for you, this is just a way to taunt your husband? Diana was taken aback. Fine. If you want the truth, we're enjoying ourselves. Having a young man in our bed, obeying our every command, is a dream come true. We lavish them with everything repeatedly, and everyone in the Fraser family is gifted. Can you believe this? Claire groaned. Oh, for heaven's sake, Mom, please be quiet. You're ruining everything, Steve chuckled in response. Let her speak. It's the most genuine thing I've heard from her, he added. Diana attempted to interject, but Claire intervened, urging her to leave and not return until she supported her decision. It was the first time Steve witnessed Claire standing up to Diana, and he couldn't discern who was more surprised when Diana stormed out of the house. In the ensuing weeks, the situation remained strained. Claire incessantly apologized for considering the arrangement and for asking Steve to accept it. She felt bound by tradition due to her mother's influence and hadn't considered the ramifications. Steve grappled with the dilemma of returning to the city for work. He couldn't delay it any longer, but the idea of leaving Claire on the island filled him with dread. Sensing his anxiety, Claire insisted on accompanying him, taking time off from her own job. The divide between her and her mother widened. They didn't speak, and Claire never broached the topic of the tradition again. After much deliberation and concern, Steve concluded that he needed to trust Claire and embark on the journey alone. Claire attempted once more to persuade Steve to let her join him, but he understood that she was engrossed in preparing a major marketing proposal and needed time to focus. Claire promised daily calls and frequent communication. Steve departed for London. The journey, involving ferry, taxi, train, and subway, left him exhausted, and he collapsed onto his hotel bed by 9 in the evening. He phoned Claire, who promptly picked up, and they conversed at length, sharing details of his trip and the city's changes. London seemed to be in a constant state of construction. Following their chat, Steve promptly drifted off to sleep, utterly drained. Despite a few taxing days at work, he felt rejuvenated. Being away from the island had provided clarity of mind. He began to ponder his relationship with Claire, mentally replaying their conversations. The man who once sought connection with a younger man seemed as distant from the woman he wedded as from the nurturing mother of his children. He sensed Diana's excessive influence over Claire and was relieved by their argument. Diana had crossed a line, and he hoped it marked the end of it. Yet, he couldn't reconcile Claire's actions and her certainty that the agreement wouldn't affect their relationship, a thought that continued to nag at him. Suddenly recalling the trees planted on their property the prior spring, Steve froze. Claire had been making regular visits to the island over the past year. A sense of dread washed over Steve as he considered who might have planted those trees. Perhaps her fervent advocacy this time stemmed from a need to justify her prior actions. He dialed Claire, and she picked up promptly. "Steve," he began, "doesn't Jake Fraser have an older brother?" There was a brief silence before Claire replied casually, "Yes, I believe he does." Despite our family's long history, there was a gap. "Right, Steve. His brother's name is Glenn," Steve continued. "He's around 19. After a moment's pause, Claire softly admitted, "Yes, that's correct. And it was Glenn who planted the trees last year." Silence followed. Steve pressed on. "And what did Glenn Fraser receive for this?" Claire snapped out of her reverie. "Just payment, Steve. Their family handles all the landscaping on the island." "So you're not entertaining Jake Fraser at this moment, are you?" Claire sighed. "No, Steve, I'm not entertaining anyone. You need to let go of this jealousy." Before she could say more, Steve hung up, ignoring subsequent calls from Claire. He needed time to process. Finally, on Friday morning, Steve answered the phone, catching Claire off guard. "Steve, thank goodness you picked up. I've been worried," she exclaimed. "Indeed. That's all," Steve replied tersely. "Of course, I love you more than anything. What time will you be back tomorrow? Should we discuss this?" Steve's calm demeanor unsettled Claire. "I won't be coming back. I'll stay here for a while," he declared. Panic surged through Claire. "Please don't do this. We need to resolve this as soon as possible." Steve's tone remained eerily composed. "True, but you didn't rush to London to do so, and you only called me during the day. I understand your evenings have been quite occupied." "Please, Steve, come home. I haven't done anything. It's just your paranoia. Come home and we can work through this," pleaded Claire. 5 days later, Steve arrived back on the island via ferry. Upon reaching the house, Claire and Diana were already there, evidently aware of his return. Claire attempted to embrace him, but Steve pulled away, prompting Claire to burst into tears while Diana looked livid. "Why are you here, Diana? This is between Claire and me," Steve demanded. "Am I correct in understanding that you two never fought?" Before Diana could reply, Claire interjected, "We did have a disagreement, but when you didn't come home, I needed support, and you weren't here." Steve furrowed his brow. "It's hard to believe that my mother-in-law would reconcile without getting her way. Given her efforts to reach an agreement, I doubt she would relent. I assume you both conspired to cover it up, as I refused to participate." Claire's eyes widened. "This is spiraling out of control, Steve. I haven't done anything," she insisted. Steve persisted. "So you both agreed to lie and conceal it?" "Because I refused." The argument ensued, going around in circles. Steve was convinced Claire had been unfaithful, but she vehemently denied it. Eventually, he retreated to the spare room, leaving Claire and Diana alone. The following day, Steve braced himself for a difficult conversation with his father-in-law, Bill Taylor, knowing it wouldn't be easy. Despite their usual rapport, Bill greeted Steve with a handshake, acknowledging he'd been anticipating their talk. They delved into tradition, and Bill disclosed that roughly 20 years ago, Diana had a brief affair with John Fraser. While he disapproved, he likened it to a youthful escapade he himself had enjoyed at 18. Steve carefully broached Diana's admission of recent rendezvous, querying if it was plausible. Bill was dismayed, confessing he had sensed something amiss, and his absence on a commercial fishing trip had provided ample opportunity. Steve inquired of Bill if he was aware of his daughter's actions. Bill acknowledged that Diana and Claire were very close, but attempted to keep him in the dark. "About a week before you left for London, they indicated that the plan was already set," he disclosed. Claire, seated at the kitchen table, couldn't meet Steve's gaze. "I can't believe my dad is going to divorce my mom, and we're the reason for it," she lamented. Diana made her own bed, asserting, "Your father would never condone this level of deceit and dishonesty. She continues to deny everything, despite John Fraser admitting the truth, and he's not the only one." After a prolonged silence, Claire murmured, "I know, that's why I feel I should tell you something." Steve remained silent. "I'm sorry, Steve, but I made an arrangement with Jake." The outburst Claire anticipated never materialized. "And last year with Glenn Fraser," she added quietly. Claire nodded in acknowledgement. Steve struggled to find words. "Please, Steve, this shouldn't alter our relationship. We've had 22 wonderful years together." "How can you say that? This changes everything," Steve retorted. "I'm deeply sorry, Steve. I felt compelled to fulfill family obligations," Claire explained. Steve seethed with anger. "That's absurd. You simply wanted to engage in relations with another man." I did, and I enjoyed it so much that I did it again. It wasn't like that. It was a duty, an obligation, Claire insisted. So you didn't derive any pleasure from it? Claire hesitated, aware of the precarious ground she was on. It was mundane, unlike ours. Just physical, not carnal. It happened once. It won't occur again. But it wasn't a one-time occurrence. You did it twice. You engaged in relations with both your brothers when they were barely 18. That makes you nothing more than promiscuous, Steve accused. Claire flinched at Steve's verbal assault. I'm not like that. I was upholding a tradition. It's about guiding young men on their journey to manhood, that's all. They were very appreciative, she defended. Claire realized she had made another error. As soon as she spoke, Steve erupted. Oh, I bet they were damn appreciative. You claim it was a one-time thing, but how many times did you do this before they came of age? Tell me, how many times? If I were 18, I'd be damn eager to please. And having a woman at my disposal for the evening and night, that's at least 5 times a day, so maybe 35, once a week. It's unlikely to be just once. Claire couldn't deny it. Both Glenn and Jake were eager to please. Little training was required, though some patience was needed at the start of the week. She relished their sculpted bodies. Just as her mother had predicted, the encounters were thrilling. She particularly enjoyed teasing them with glimpses of stockings or cleavage, knowing that she would fully surrender to them that night. At one point, Jake even confessed his love for her. It was the only moment she realized how a week could impact her normal life and cherished marriage, and she wasted no time in clarifying the reality to Jake. Steve's tirade continued. And what exactly does an 18-year-old need these days? I bet they had their sights set on you from day one, and you couldn't get enough, could you? Claire wept. It's not like that. It was meant to be a thrilling adventure. It was just physical. I know it stings your pride, but I only desire you, and you're the one who completes me. Steve became enraged. I'd argue it's more about trust and vows than ego. What about your wedding vows? Does tradition override them? It's not ego when your life partner betrays you. And for what? Not for anything significant or with serious consequences, but for the sake of traditional lovemaking with some men. Claire blushed. I understand you're angry and upset with me, but we're strong enough to overcome this. After Glenn, you didn't notice anything, but we grew closer. I thought it would be the same with Jake. I didn't know because I trusted the woman I loved selflessly. Believe me, I'll never do anything like that again. Should I believe you? Trust you? You must be joking, Claire shot back, almost shouting. You can, I swear. I'm truly sorry for hurting you. Think about the wonderful life we still have ahead. We can return to how things used to be. Did you think about our wonderful life when you were scheming all this and lying on your back? No, I'd never have imagined this if I'd known the consequences. I'd never deliberately hurt you, but I did anyway. I know. And I'm really sorry, and what do you think of it? Claire was at a loss for words. Clearly you don't grasp how I feel. You ripped out my heart and soul. How the hell can you fix this, Claire? With that, Steve stormed off before he did something he would regret. He continued walking, attempting to clear his head, but even the beauty of the evening sunset failed to improve his mood. As he turned back towards the village, he was surprised to encounter Elder Helen Brown. Steve could barely manage a nod in return to her greeting. Helen smiled knowingly, acknowledging that their meeting was no coincidence. Observing Steve heading towards the cliff path, she anticipated catching up with him upon his return. Helen offered to sit on a rock ledge and cautiously inquired if Steve would share anything about his circumstances. Steve saw no reason to withhold anything and proceeded to divulge everything. Yet, speaking aloud failed to alleviate the weight burdening his shoulders. Helen listened attentively without interruption. Steve hesitated to mention Diana's proposition involving one of the elders engaging in carnal activity with him in exchange for Claire fulfilling her obligations. However, he decided to include it verbatim, considering Helen's involvement in the saga. Upon completion, Helen remained silent for a prolonged period before responding, Steve, I never made such an offer. Diana never discussed any agreements with me or Moira. It's not something we would even consider. I suspect Diana was attempting to manipulate you into agreeing to extramarital relations to justify their plans. Steve was baffled by her response. Helen added, Furthermore, these arrangements mostly vanished decades ago, and even then, it was only for the first night, never a week. Week-long arrangements were typically for household chores or planting, with one night of union at the end. Perhaps Melissa, Diana, and Susan acted out of necessity. Steve shook his head in disbelief. Just as he started to come to terms with his wife's actions, another shock emerged. Helen assured him that she would discuss the matter with Moira and take the necessary steps to strip Diana of her elder status. She acknowledged that it would be scandalous, as such actions had never occurred before, but deemed Diana's behavior unforgivable. Nowadays, elders are expected to engage in social activities and support the island's inhabitants. Helen gazed at Steve. "What's your plan?" Steve shrugged. "I can't get her to grasp the consequences, but I want her to feel what I'm feeling right now." They sat in silence until Steve noticed a faint smile playing at the corner of Helen's mouth. "What's amusing you?" he inquired. Helen's smile broadened as she proposed. "What if you stay with me for a week? Seriously, we won't let Claire and Diana in on it. We'll tell them I'm honored to accept the agreement offered on my behalf as an elder. That way, you give Claire a taste of her own medicine, and I get to needle Diana for dragging my name into this mess." Steve was intrigued but voiced concern. "Won't this injure your reputation? I'm still married, and people will talk." Helen dismissed his worry. "I couldn't care less about gossip. And truth be told, nearly the whole island already knows about your situation, Steve." The realization stung, but Steve's spirits lifted with a pleasant idea he shared with Helen. "Seriously, I'd love to plant some trees for you. It'll give Claire and Diana pause." They chuckled together and swiftly resolved all the details. Steve returned home and quickly packed his belongings. To Claire, he simply explained that upon reflection, he had decided to accept her mother's gracious offer regarding the island's elder, and given the circumstances, spending a week with another woman seemed quite reasonable. He left Claire in tears, pleading with him not to proceed. His time with Helen proved unexpectedly pleasant. She proved to be excellent company and a skilled cook. Steve busied himself with home improvements and even planted a few trees in the backyard. They also discussed Steve's predicament. He hoped this week would give Claire some insight into his feelings, but he soon noticed signs that Claire grasped the gravity of her actions. Reconciliation seemed out of reach. True to his promise, Steve refrained from closeness with Helen, though they came close a couple of times, not from lack of desire. Soon after, Claire confronted Helen at the village store, accusing her of having an affair with Steve. Helen responded with a sweet smile. "Claire, dear, you know well this isn't an affair. It's an arrangement, and it won't impact your marriage," Helen replied calmly, echoing Claire's own words. Claire persisted. "You can't do this. He's my husband, and you should know I'm fulfilling the offer made by your mother on my behalf. Who was it? Me, Moira, or even your mother for a week? Steve made his choice, and I'm bound to honor tradition. It could have been worse. He could have chosen Diana. I've promised to return him safe and sound, albeit a bit weary." Claire was taken aback. You old strumpet," Helen responded calmly. "I would have thought that term would be more fitting for someone who slept with 18-year-old boys behind her faithful husband." With that, Helen stormed off, leaving Claire speechless as the villagers in the shop watched. The next day, Claire, enraged and hysterical, attempted to kick down Helen's front door before Steve intervened. "Please, Steve, I'm so sorry. Come home. I'm just doing what you did." "Why are you so upset? As you said, this shouldn't concern us." "I had no idea. It's just cruel. It torments me. I can't stop thinking about you. And that old woman, Steve." "Yes, it sounds familiar. Welcome to my world," he said curtly, slamming the door shut. Steve returned home the following week to a much quieter Claire. She started, "I can't believe you did this to me, but I can forgive you if you can. I understand how you feel about all this." "That's your perspective. You've only experienced part of it, not the deceit and lies. Our entire existence here is built on lies," Claire persisted. "We're still the same people, the same marriage. The same marriage that led you to bed other men. A marriage you ruined, and I still can't comprehend why. Are you truly that tired of me?" "It was never about you or boredom. If we can't go back, we can build something new. Let's look forward to all those retirement dreams, to the things we could have together. Travel, grandchildren. We can still do it all. We still love each other, no matter what. It's not over yet, Steve. I will do anything to prove my love for you." Steve remained in the house, occupying the spare room, grappling with daunting thoughts about what he would do with his life if he left Claire. He couldn't determine whether failure or abyss best described his prospects. It's simpler to stay, and he still loves her. Considering the consequences, he doubted Claire would repeat her actions. The island was serene, and he had envisioned traveling, investing years in planning his options and sharing those dreams with Claire. Did he truly want to abandon it all? Claire pondered how it had come to this. It was all so bewildering. When her mother proposed an agreement, she turned it down. Yet Diana persisted for months. Then she encountered Glenn Fraser at a dance. He was exceptionally good-looking and wonderfully polite. They danced together multiple times at social gatherings, and they hit it off. Diana shared details about her own arrangements and how thrilling they were. She portrayed it as a guilt-free romantic escapade and never considered it an affair. It was simply tradition. Despite this, she knew Steve didn't see it that way, so she kept everything hidden. If he never found out, it wouldn't cause him any pain. The week with Glenn was marvelous. During the day, he planted trees and spent evenings in her bed. He was quite nervous, but incredibly charming and eager to please. By the end of the week, he had become a skilled lover. His size and physicality, combined with patience and technique, made him quite adept. Claire proved to be an excellent teacher. The week filled her with confidence. She felt like she had rekindled her sensuality, which had dwindled during the years of motherhood. Was it tradition or just illicit lovemaking, as Steve suggested? She had to acknowledge it was both. But didn't she deserve a bit of satisfaction? After devoting 22 years to raising children and being a devoted wife, she was certain it didn't damage her relationship with Steve. Things had never been better. She loved him more than ever. And after that week, they started making love more frequently. Jake appeared even more attractive, stirring feelings of arousal at the prospect of sharing her bed with him. Steve, always astute, uncovered the tradition. Aunt Melissa's memoirs had unwittingly spilled the beans. Claire and her mother attempted to persuade Steve to agree, but he remained steadfast. Reflecting on it, Claire realized that her decision to deceive him was perhaps the worst she had ever made. Yet she remained confident that once the pain subsided, she could win Steve back. All she needed to do was remind him of the strength of their relationship and their shared aspirations for the future. He would surely want to stay together for the sake of their daughters and future grandchildren. This argument could work in her favor. To Steve's surprise, their daughters arrived on the island just 2 days later. Nicole wasted no time in rebuking Steve for his alleged mistreatment of her mother, dismissing the notion of living apart as absurd. Meanwhile, Michelle appeared to be observing quietly, awaiting further details. A slight smile played on Claire's lips, suggesting she believed Steve had not noticed her manipulations and lies over the years. Apparently, she assumed he would shield their daughters from knowledge of her actions, prioritizing their protection, as always. However, all of Steve's doubts were dispelled. Claire had misjudged the situation entirely. Steve raised his voice in a manner his daughters had never witnessed before. "Your mother was involved with younger men for 2 weeks. They were younger than both of you. She doesn't seem to grasp that. I won't condone this behavior," Steve asserted. Claire promptly refuted the claim, insisting that Steve had misinterpreted the situation and that the men were merely doing landscaping work. Steve had to concede that she was skilled. She almost convinced him. Both daughters sensed that something was amiss, though their father's suspicions seemed far-fetched. Perhaps he was beginning to lose touch with reality. While Steve might agree with that notion, he suggested involving Grandpa Bill or the elders to arbitrate the truth. Claire feigned a fainting spell, though it wasn't very convincing. All three stared at her, puzzled, awaiting an equally poorly executed recovery. Steve regarded her with disdain. "I can't trust you anymore, it's over. There's no going back or forward with flashing lights. How will you face yourself in the mirror knowing you betrayed me? Nothing can undo that. And how will I feel, accepting this? We need each other, Steve. We've always relied on each other, making us both stronger. I'm right for you. Deep down you still know it. Don't throw away your life to punish me. I can handle this, Claire, but I won't let you ruin me. I'll forge a new path. We all must face our choices and stay true to ourselves. You'll have to live with the fact that you cheated, lied, and discarded what we had. I'll live with leaving the woman I loved, but you're not who I thought you were, not the kind and good person I fell in love with. I wish I could return her, but not you." Steve departed the island with his daughters, opting to rent an apartment closer to their university. The girls were stunned by their mother and grandmother's actions. He never returned. Before leaving, he set fire to the trees in the orchard. Claire watched the orange glow with tears in her eyes. Bill assisted Steve in selling the house since Claire lacked the funds to maintain it. The divorces of Diana and Claire created a scandal, sealing the fate of the remaining tradition. Diana was the first to be ousted from her elder position. Both she and Claire became social pariahs. No woman trusted or befriended them. Yet they defiantly remained on the island. Several months later, Helen Brown resigned as an elder. Island residents noticed her spending less time there, eventually visiting for only a few weeks each year. When questioned, she revealed she now resides with her family near a place called Durham.
Story 4.
Wyatt O'Connor's life was perfect, or so he thought. The warm Texas sun streamed through the windows of his Austin home as he pored over blueprints spread across his home office desk. At 40, Wyatt had built a thriving construction consultancy from the ground up. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, blue eyes narrowing as he focused on the intricate details of his latest project. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. "Daddy." Wyatt looked up to see his 8-year-old daughter Lily peeking around the doorframe, her golden curls framing a face that was the spitting image of her mother's. "Hey, sweetheart," Wyatt said, his stern expression softening into a smile. "What's up?" Lily bounded into the room, pigtails bouncing. "Can you help me with my science project? It's due tomorrow, and I don't know how to make the volcano erupt." Wyatt glanced at his watch. It was already past 7, and he still had work to finish. But one look at Lily's pleading eyes melted his resolve. "Sure thing, kiddo. Let's go see what we can do." As they walked down the hallway, Wyatt's 10-year-old son Braden zoomed past them, Nerf gun in hand. "Watch out," he yelled, diving behind the couch. "No running in the house," Wyatt called after him, more out of habit than real annoyance. He loved the chaos of family life, even if it sometimes interfered with work. In the kitchen, Wyatt found his wife Elena unloading groceries. At 38, she was still as beautiful as the day they'd met in college. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore yoga pants and one of Wyatt's old t-shirts. "Hey, hon," Wyatt said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Need a hand?" Elena flinched slightly, turning away to stack cans in the pantry. "No, I've got it. Thanks." Wyatt frowned, a familiar pang of unease settling in his gut. Lately, it seemed like Elena was always finding reasons to avoid his touch. He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on Lily's volcano project. "All right, let's see what we're working with," he said, examining the papier-mâché creation on the kitchen table. As Wyatt and Lily mixed baking soda and vinegar, the front door opened. "Hello, O'Connor clan," a booming voice called out. "Uncle Travis." Braden and Lily chorused, abandoning their activities to rush the newcomer. Wyatt's younger brother Travis, still in his firefighter uniform, scooped both kids into a bear hug. At 35, Travis was the spitting image of Wyatt, just a bit rougher around the edges. Where Wyatt was all clean-cut precision, Travis had a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and an easygoing charm that drew people to him, like moths to a flame. "Hey, little bro," Wyatt said, clapping Travis on the shoulder. "What brings you by?" Travis grinned, ruffling Braden's hair. "Can a guy just drop in to see his favorite family?" "Uncle Travis, will you play video games with me?" Braden asked, tugging on his uncle's sleeve. "Not tonight, buddy," Wyatt intervened. "It's almost bedtime, and you still need to finish your homework." Braden's face fell, but Travis swooped in to save the day. "Tell you what, champ, I'll come by this weekend, and we'll have an epic gaming marathon." "Deal, deal." Braden high-fived his uncle before reluctantly trudging off to his room. Wyatt turned to Travis. "You spoil them, you know." Travis shrugged, his easy smile never faltering. "That's what uncles are for, right?" He glanced towards the kitchen. "Hey, Elena." Wyatt didn't miss the way Elena's posture straightened at the sound of Travis's voice. She turned, a bright smile on her face. "Travis, I didn't know you were coming by. Are you hungry? I can whip something up." "Nah, I'm good," Travis said. "Just wanted to see if Wyatt needed any help with that deck project he mentioned." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "Deck project? Oh, right. Yeah, I've been meaning to replace some of the rotting boards out back. But it's pretty late to start on that now." "No time like the present," Travis insisted. "Come on, bro. I've got a few hours to kill before my shift. Let's at least take a look and plan it out." Wyatt hesitated, glancing at Elena. She waved them off. "Go on. I'll get the kids to bed." As Wyatt followed Travis out to the backyard, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he trusted his brother implicitly. Travis had always been there for him, helping with the kids, lending a hand around the house. He was practically a second father to Braden and Lily. Over the next few weeks, Wyatt found himself increasingly preoccupied with work. A big project was nearing its deadline, and he was putting in long hours at the office. When he did make it home, he was often too exhausted to do more than kiss the kids goodnight before collapsing into bed. One night, as Wyatt was getting ready to leave the office, his phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Wyatt sighed, rubbing his temples. It wasn't the first such message he'd received lately. In fact, it seemed like Elena was finding more and more reasons to be out of the house. When he'd asked about it, she'd brushed him off, saying she was helping a friend through a tough time or catching up with old college roommates. He typed out a response. "Everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, a terse reply came through. "Fine. Just busy." Wyatt stared at the screen, a knot forming in his stomach. He couldn't remember the last time he and Elena had really talked, let alone been intimate. Every time he tried to initiate physical contact, she found an excuse to pull away. As he drove home, Wyatt's mind raced. Was Elena unhappy? Had he been neglecting her, too focused on work and the kids? He resolved to make more of an effort, to reconnect with his wife and rebuild the closeness they'd once shared. But over the next few days, Wyatt's attempts at reconciliation fell flat. He brought home flowers, only to find Elena had already left for a girls' night out. He suggested a date night, but she claimed a headache and went to bed early. Each rejection chipped away at Wyatt's confidence, leaving him feeling increasingly isolated in his own home. It was Travis who finally broached the subject, cornering Wyatt in the garage one Saturday afternoon as they worked on Braden's bike. "Everything all right with you and Elena?" Travis asked, his voice carefully neutral. Wyatt's hand slipped, skinning his knuckle on the bike chain. He cursed under his breath before answering. "Yeah, of course. Why do you ask?" Travis shrugged, not meeting Wyatt's eyes. "I don't know, man. You two just seem distant lately. I thought maybe you'd had a fight or something." "We're fine," Wyatt insisted, more sharply than he'd intended. "Just busy, that's all." Travis held up his hands in surrender. Okay. I was just worried about you, bro. You know I'm here if you ever need to talk, right?" Wyatt softened, feeling a rush of gratitude for his brother's concern. "I know, Travis. Thanks. Really, everything's fine. I've just been stressed about this project at work, and I guess I've been taking it out on Elena. I'll make it up to her." But as the days wore on, Wyatt found it increasingly difficult to ignore the growing chasm between him and his wife. Elena was spending more and more time away from home, often not returning until late in the evening. When she was around, she was distracted and irritable, snapping at the kids for minor infractions and avoiding Wyatt's attempts at conversation. One night, as Wyatt lay awake listening to Elena's steady breathing beside him, a terrible thought crept into his mind. Was it possible she was having an affair? He immediately pushed the idea away, ashamed of his own suspicion. Elena would never do that to him, to their family. Would she? But once planted, the seed of doubt began to grow. Wyatt found himself paying closer attention to Elena's comings and goings, noting the way she guarded her phone and how she always seemed to be texting someone. He told himself he was being paranoid, that stress and insecurity were clouding his judgment. But he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was very, very wrong. It was a Tuesday evening when everything came to a head. Wyatt had wrapped up his work early, determined to surprise Elena and the kids with takeout from their favorite Italian place. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Travis's truck parked on the street. A wave of relief washed over him. Of course, Travis was probably just helping out with the kids while Elena ran errands. His brother was always ready to lend a hand, a fact for which Wyatt was endlessly grateful. Wyatt entered the house quietly, not wanting to spoil the surprise. The living room and kitchen were empty, but he heard muffled noises coming from upstairs. Frowning, he set the takeout bags on the counter and made his way towards the staircase. As he ascended, the noises grew clearer. They were coming from the master bedroom, his and Elena's bedroom. Wyatt's heart began to race, his palms growing slick with sweat. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a misunderstanding. He reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling. For a moment, he hesitated. Did he really want to know what was on the other side? But Wyatt O'Connor had never been a coward. Taking a deep breath, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted him would be forever seared into his memory. There, on the bed he shared with his wife, were Elena and Travis. Naked, entangled, in the throes of passion. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. Wyatt blinked, certain he must be hallucinating. But the image before him didn't change. His wife, his brother, betraying him in the most intimate way possible. Then, as if in slow motion, Elena's eyes met his. They widened in shock and horror. "Wyatt," she gasped, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. The sound of his name on her lips shattered Wyatt's paralysis. A roar of rage tore from his throat as he lunged forward, grabbing Travis by the shoulder and yanking him off the bed. Travis stumbled, nearly falling as he tried to regain his balance. "Wyatt, wait. I can explain." But Wyatt was beyond explanations. Years of pent-up frustration, doubt, and now betrayal exploded in a fury of fists. He slammed Travis against the wall, his knuckles connecting with his brother's jaw with a satisfying crunch. Travis didn't fight back, whether from shock or guilt. Wyatt didn't know or care. He pummeled his brother relentlessly, each blow fueled by a fresh wave of anger and pain. "How could you?" Wyatt growled, punctuating each word with another punch. "My wife, my children." In the background, he could hear Elena screaming, begging him to stop. But her pleas only fueled his rage. How dare she try to protect Travis now, after what they'd done? It wasn't until Travis slumped to the floor, his face a bloody mess, that Wyatt finally stepped back. He was breathing heavily, his knuckles split and aching. He turned to Elena, who had wrapped herself in a blanket and was cowering in the corner of the room. "How long?" Wyatt demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Elena sobbed, shaking her head. "Wyatt, please. It's not what you think. We didn't mean for this to happen." "How long?" Wyatt roared, causing both Elena and Travis to flinch. Elena broke down completely, her words coming out in a jumbled rush. "It had just happened recently. I swear, Wyatt, it didn't mean anything. We made a mistake. Please, you have to believe me." But Wyatt could see the lie in her eyes. His gaze hardened, his voice turning to ice. "Don't insult me by lying, Elena. Tell me the truth, or I swear to God, I will walk out that door and you will never see me again." The threat seemed to penetrate Elena's hysteria. She took a shuddering breath, her eyes darting between Wyatt and Travis's prone form. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she confessed. 10 years, she said. "It's been going on for 10 years. The words hit Wyatt like a physical blow. 10 years. Their entire marriage had been a lie. Every time Travis had come over to help out, every family dinner, every moment Wyatt had trusted his brother with his children, it had all been a facade. As the full weight of the betrayal sank in, a cold, calculating anger replaced Wyatt's initial fury. 10 years. Braden was 10. Lily was 8. The timeline suddenly became crystal clear, and with it, a chilling realization. Wyatt's gaze swept from Elena to Travis and back again. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. He could hear Elena calling after him, her voice desperate and pleading, but he didn't look back. In his home office, Wyatt locked the door and sank into his chair. His mind was racing, piecing together a decade of lies and deceit. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving on autopilot as he searched for DNA testing services. As he placed an order for 3 test kits, Wyatt felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The life he'd thought he had was gone, shattered beyond repair. But he would have the truth, all of it. And then, he promised himself, there would be a reckoning. Elena and Travis had destroyed his world. Now Wyatt would destroy theirs. Wyatt sat in his home office, the DNA test kits lying on the desk before him. The house had fallen eerily quiet after his confrontation with Elena and Travis. He could hear muffled sobbing from the master bedroom, but it barely registered. His mind was focused on one thing, getting answers. A soft knock on the office door broke his concentration. "Wyatt." Elena's voice was trembling. "Please, can we talk?" Wyatt's jaw clenched. "There's nothing to talk about." "But the kids. Wyatt cut her off, his voice sharp. "Are they even mine, Elena?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by Elena's shaky breathing. "Wyatt, please," she finally whispered. "They're your children. You raised them. You love them." Wyatt stood abruptly, yanking the door open. Elena stumbled back, her eyes red and puffy, hair disheveled. She'd thrown on a robe, but Wyatt could still see the marks on her neck, marks his brother had left. "Don't," he growled. "Don't you dare try to manipulate me. Not now." Elena reached for him, but Wyatt stepped back. I wouldn't." 10 years, Elena," Wyatt said, his voice dangerously low. 10 years of lies. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a convenient cover for you and Travis?" Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "Of course I loved you. I still love you. This had just happened. We never meant to hurt you." Wyatt laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Never meant to hurt me? You've been fucking my brother for our entire marriage. In our bed, in our home. While I worked to provide for this family, you two were making a fool of me." "It wasn't like that," Elena protested weakly. "Then what was it like?" Wyatt demanded. "Explain it to me, Elena. Help me understand how you could betray me like this." Elena opened her mouth, then closed it again. She seemed to shrink under Wyatt's gaze. "That's what I thought," Wyatt said coldly. "Where's Travis?" He left," Elena mumbled. After what happened upstairs." Wyatt nodded, unsurprised. Of course his coward of a brother had run away. "Good. I want you both out of this house by morning. Pack your things and go." Elena's eyes widened in panic. "But where will we go? What about the children?" "You should have thought about that before you destroyed this family," Wyatt replied, unmoved. "The kids stay here. I'll explain things to them in the morning." "Wyatt, please," Elena begged, grabbing his arm. "Don't do this. We can work through this. For the kids, if nothing else." Wyatt jerked away from her touch. "There is no anymore, Elena. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences." With that, he turned and walked back into his office, closing and locking the door behind him. He could hear Elena's muffled sobs through the wood, but he felt nothing. The love he'd once had for her had been burned away, leaving only ashes and a cold, hard resolve. Wyatt spent the night in his office, making calls and sending emails. By morning, he'd set up appointments with a divorce lawyer and a private investigator. He'd also arranged for a colleague to cover his work commitments for the next few days. This situation required his full attention. When he finally emerged from his office, the house was quiet. Elena's car was gone from the driveway, and a quick check of the master bedroom confirmed she'd taken most of her clothes and personal items. Good. At least she'd had the sense to follow his instructions. Wyatt made his way to the kitchen, starting a pot of coffee. He'd need the caffeine to get through the conversations ahead. As he waited for the coffee to brew, he heard small feet padding down the stairs. "Daddy." Lily's voice was sleepy and confused. "Where's Mommy?" Wyatt turned, forcing a smile onto his face. "Morning, sweetheart. Mommy had to go away for a little while. Come on, let's get you some breakfast." As he poured cereal for Lily and a still groggy Braden, Wyatt's mind raced. How much should he tell them? How could he explain that their entire world was about to change? "Is Mom okay?" Braden asked, more perceptive than his sister. "She seemed upset last night." Wyatt sighed, sitting down at the table with them. "Kids, there's something we need to talk about. Your mom and we're having some problems. She's going to be staying somewhere else for a while." Lily's lower lip trembled. "Did you have a fight?" "Something like that," Wyatt said, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, even when grown-ups love each other, they do things that hurt each other. And sometimes, that means they can't live together anymore." "Are you getting divorced?" Braden asked bluntly. Wyatt met his son's eyes that looked so much like Travis's. He pushed the thought away. "Yes, buddy, I think we are." Lily burst into tears, and Braden's face crumpled. Wyatt gathered them both into his arms, holding them tight as they cried. His own eyes remained dry. He had no more tears left to shed. Over the next few days, Wyatt threw himself into action. He met with his lawyer, Lauren Cortez, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for ruthlessness in divorce cases. "You've got a strong case here, Mr. O'Connor," Lauren said, reviewing the notes Wyatt had provided. "Infidelity, long-term deception. We can use this to ensure you get full custody and a favorable division of assets." Wyatt nodded. "I want to nail them to the wall, Lauren. They don't deserve a cent. Lauren's eyebrow raised slightly. Them? You mentioned your wife's affair, but it was with my brother, Wyatt said flatly. Lauren let out a low whistle. Jesus. Okay, that changes things. We could definitely use that. Have you considered a paternity test for the children? Already done, Wyatt replied. I'm waiting on the results. Good, Lauren nodded approvingly. If they turn out not to be yours biologically, we can use that to argue against any child support claims. Though I should warn you, given the length of your marriage and your role as their father, you might still be on the hook legally. Wyatt's jaw clenched. They're not getting a dime from me. Not Elena, not Travis, not those kids. I want them all out of my life for good. Lauren studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll go for the jugular. I'll draw up the paperwork, and we'll get this ball rolling. As Wyatt left Lauren's office, his phone buzzed. It was a text from the lab. The DNA results were in. His heart pounding, Wyatt opened the email. The words on the screen blurred as he read them, but their meaning was clear. Neither Braden nor Lily were his biological children. The life he'd built, the family he'd loved and protected, had all been a lie. Wyatt stumbled to his car, barely making it inside before the rage overtook him. He slammed his fists against the steering wheel, a primal scream tearing from his throat. How could they do this to him? How could they let him raise children that weren't even his? When the initial wave of anger passed, Wyatt felt a cold clarity settle over him. He knew what he had to do. Elena and Travis hadn't just betrayed him, they'd stolen years of his life, tricked him into loving children that belonged to his brother. They would pay for that. He would make sure of it. Over the next few weeks, Wyatt's life became a whirlwind of legal meetings, therapy sessions for the kids, and long nights spent planning his revenge. He'd moved Braden and Lily into the guest rooms, unable to look at them without seeing Travis's features reflected back at him. He knew it wasn't their fault, but he couldn't bring himself to feel the love he once had for them. Elena had tried to contact him multiple times, leaving tearful voicemails and sending pleading texts. Wyatt ignored them all, communicating only through his lawyer. Travis, true to form, had disappeared entirely. Wyatt had heard through the grapevine that his brother had taken a leave of absence from the fire department, citing personal reasons. It was a crisp autumn morning when Wyatt finally came face to face with Elena again, in the sterile confines of a mediation room. She looked terrible dark circles under her eyes, hair limp and unwashed. Wyatt felt a fleeting moment of satisfaction at her obvious distress. Wyatt, Elena said softly as he sat down across from her. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Wyatt said nothing, simply nodding to Lauren to begin. Mrs. O'Connor, Lauren began, her tone coldly professional. We're here today to discuss the terms of your divorce. Mr. O'Connor is prepared to offer you a one-time settlement in exchange for your agreement to terminate all parental rights and waive any claim to alimony or child support. Elena's eyes widened in shock. Terminate my rights? Wyatt, you can't be serious. They're my children. They're not mine, Wyatt replied, speaking for the first time. He slid a copy of the DNA results across the table. And soon, they won't be yours either. Legally, at least. Elena's hands shook as she read the report. But this doesn't change anything. You raised them, Wyatt. You're their father in every way that matters. No, Wyatt said coldly. I'm the man you and Travis tricked into raising your bastards. That ends now. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. Please, Wyatt, don't do this. They love you. They need you. They need their real father, Wyatt spat. Where is Travis, by the way? Too much of a coward to face me. Elena flinched. He left town. I don't know where he is. Wyatt laughed bitterly. Of course he did. Well, you'd better find him, because he's about to become a single father. You can't just throw them away. Elena cried. After everything we've been through, everything we've shared nothing but lies. Wyatt cut her off. Every moment of our marriage was a lie. Every I love you, every family dinner, every Christmas morning, all of it was built on your deception. Elena buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Wyatt watched her, unmoved. Once, her tears would have broken his heart. Now, they only fueled his resolve. Here's what's going to happen, Wyatt said, his voice cold and businesslike. You're going to sign these papers, terminating your parental rights. In exchange, I'll give you a one-time payment of $50,000. Enough for you to start over somewhere far away from here. Elena looked up, her face a mask of disbelief. 50,000? That's nothing. What about the house? Your business? We built that life together, Wyatt. No, Wyatt corrected her. I built that life. You were too busy fucking my brother to contribute anything meaningful. That's not fair. Elena protested. I raised our children. I supported you, Dash. You raised his children, Wyatt snarled. And the only thing you supported was your own selfish desires. You get nothing, Elena. The house, the business, the money, it all stays with me. You're lucky I'm offering you anything at all. Elena turned to Lauren, desperation in her eyes. He can't do this, can he? I have rights. Lauren's smile was shark-like. Actually, Mrs. O'Connor, given the circumstances of your infidelity and the duration of your deception, Mr. O'Connor's offer is quite generous. I'd advise you to take it. But what about Braden and Lily? Elena asked, her voice small. They'll be placed in foster care, Wyatt said flatly. Unless you can convince Travis to step up and be a father. Elena's face crumpled. How can you do this? How can you be so cruel? Cruel? Wyatt leaned forward, his eyes blazing. Cruel is lying to your husband for 10 years. Cruel is letting him believe he's a father while you're carrying on with his brother. Cruel is destroying a family for your own selfish pleasure. This is justice. With shaking hands, Elena picked up the pen Lauren offered. I need time to think, to talk to Travis. You have 24 hours, Wyatt said, standing. After that, the offer is off the table, and I'll make sure you don't see a penny or those kids ever again. As he walked out of the room, Wyatt could hear Elena's broken sobs behind him. He felt nothing but a grim satisfaction. This was only the beginning of his revenge. Over the next few days, Wyatt set his plan into motion. He hired a private investigator to track down Travis, determined to make his brother face the consequences of his actions. He also began the process of putting the house on the market and transferring his business assets into a trust that Elena couldn't touch. The children, sensing the tension in the house, became withdrawn and sullen. Wyatt did his best to care for them, but he couldn't bring himself to offer the warmth and affection he once had. Every time he looked at them, he saw Travis's betrayal staring back at him. It was a week after the mediation meeting when Wyatt's phone rang with an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Wyatt. Travis's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. Please don't hang up. We need to talk. Wyatt's grip on the phone tightened. There's nothing to talk about, Travis. You made your choice. I know, Travis said quickly. I know I fucked up, but please think about the kids. They don't deserve to suffer for our mistakes. Our mistakes? Wyatt laughed bitterly. No, this was your mistake. You and Elena's. And now you get to live with the consequences. What do you want from me, Wyatt? Travis asked, a note of desperation in his voice. I'll do anything. Just don't take it out on Braden and Lily. Wyatt was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold and determined. You want to make things right, Travis? Then you step up. You take responsibility for your children. You tell them the truth that their uncle is really their father, and that their mother is a lying whore who destroyed their family. Wyatt, come on, Travis pleaded. They're just kids. We can figure out a way to co-parent, to make this work, Dash. No, Wyatt cut him off. There is no anymore. There is no co-parenting. You took my life from me, Travis. My marriage, my children, my trust, it's all gone. So now I'm taking everything from you. What do you mean? Travis asked, fear evident in his voice. I mean, I'm going to destroy you, Wyatt said calmly. Your career, your reputation, everything. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you can get a job flipping burgers. And those kids you claim to care about, they'll know exactly what kind of man their father really is. You can't do this, Travis protested weakly. Watch me, Wyatt replied. And with that, he hung up. As he set the phone down, Wyatt felt a cold sense of satisfaction settle over him. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Elena and Travis would understand the true cost of their betrayal. And Wyatt? He would rebuild his life, stronger and colder than before, with the ashes of their destruction as his foundation. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Wyatt's home office, casting long shadows across the room. He sat at his desk, surrounded by legal documents and financial statements. The house was quiet. Braden and Lily were staying with a neighbor for the week. Wyatt had told them it was a special sleepover, but the truth was he couldn't bear to look at them anymore. A sharp knock on the front door broke the silence. Wyatt glanced at his watch, right on time. He stood, straightening his tie as he made his way to the door. Lauren Cortez stood on the porch, her briefcase in hand. "Morning, Mr. O'Connor. Ready to finish this?" Wyatt nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "More than ready. Let's end this charade once and for all." They settled in the living room, Lauren spreading papers across the coffee table. "I've drawn up the final divorce agreement as you requested. It's aggressive to say the least." "Good," Wyatt said, his voice hard. "They don't deserve any mercy." Lauren hesitated, then spoke. "Wyatt, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Cutting all ties with the children. It's not something you can easily undo." Wyatt's eyes flashed. "They're not my children, Lauren. They never were. I was just a fool who got tricked into raising another man's kids." "Biologically, yes," Lauren conceded. "But you've been their father in every other way for a decade. That bond is based on lies." Wyatt cut her off. "I don't want to hear any more about it. Let's just get this done." Lauren nodded, her professional mask slipping back into place. "All right. I've scheduled the final mediation for this afternoon. Elena will be there with her lawyer. Are you prepared for that?" Wyatt's jaw clenched. "I'm prepared to end this, once and for all." The mediation room was cold and sterile, much like Wyatt's emotions as he sat across from Elena. She looked terrible, hair unkempt, dark circles under her eyes. A small part of Wyatt felt a twinge of satisfaction at her obvious distress. Elena's lawyer, a nervous-looking young man, cleared his throat. "Mr. O'Connor, we've reviewed your proposal, and frankly, it's unconscionable." "My client, your client," Wyatt interrupted, "is lucky I'm not pressing charges for fraud. 10 years of lies, of raising children that aren't mine. She should be grateful I'm offering anything at all." Elena flinched at his words. "Wyatt, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're still our children. You love them, I love the lie," Wyatt snapped. "Everything about our life together was a lie, Elena. And now it's time to face the truth." Lauren stepped in, her voice cool and professional. "Let's review the terms, shall we? Mr. O'Connor is offering a one-time payment of $50,000 in exchange for Mrs. O'Connor terminating all parental rights and agreeing to a permanent no-contact order for both herself and the children." Elena's lawyer sputtered. "This is outrageous. My client has been a stay-at-home mother for years. She's entitled to alimony, child support. She's entitled to nothing," Wyatt growled. "She chose to throw away our marriage for an affair with my brother. She chose to lie to me about the paternity of those children. Now, she can live with those choices." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Wyatt, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please don't punish the children for my mistakes. They love you. They need you." Wyatt leaned forward, his eyes cold. "No, Elena. They need their real father. Where's Travis, by the way? Too much of a coward to face me." Elena looked down, her voice small. He left town. I don't know where he is." "Of course he did," Wyatt scoffed. "Well, you'd better find him. Because as of today, those kids are his problem, not mine." The mediation dragged on for hours, but in the end, Wyatt got everything he wanted. Elena, broken and defeated, signed away her rights to the children and agreed to the no-contact order. As she stood to leave, she made one last plea. "Wyatt," she said, her voice trembling, "I know you hate me, and you have every right to. But please don't hate them. They're innocent in all this." Wyatt stood, gathering his papers. "Goodbye, Elena. I hope you and Travis are very happy together." As he walked out of the room, he could hear Elena's sobs echoing behind him. He felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. Phase 1 of his revenge was complete. Over the next few weeks, Wyatt threw himself into work, expanding his construction business and taking on new projects. He sold the family home, unable to bear living in a place filled with so many false memories. The kids had been placed in foster care temporarily, pending Travis's return. It was a crisp autumn morning when Wyatt's phone rang with an unknown number. He answered, his voice clipped. Wyatt O'Connor. Wyatt. Travis's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. Please, don't hang up. We need to talk. Wyatt's grip on the phone tightened. There's nothing to talk about, Travis. You made your choice. I know, Travis said quickly. I know I fucked up, but please think about the kids. They don't deserve to suffer for our mistakes. Our mistakes? Wyatt laughed bitterly. No, this was your mistake. You and Elena's. And now you get to live with the consequences. What do you want from me, Wyatt? Travis asked, desperation creeping into his voice. I'll do anything. Just don't take it out on Braden and Lily. Wyatt was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold and determined. You want to make things right, Travis? Then you step up. You take responsibility for your children. You tell them the truth that their uncle is really their father, and that their mother is a lying whore who destroyed their family. Wyatt, come on, Travis pleaded. They're just kids. We can figure out a way to co-parent, to make this work. No, Wyatt cut him off. There is no we anymore. There is no co-parenting. You took my life from me, Travis. My marriage, my children, my trust, it's all gone. So now I'm taking everything from you. What do you mean? Travis asked, fear evident in his voice. I mean, I'm going to destroy you, Wyatt said calmly. Your career, your reputation, everything. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you can get a job flipping burgers. You can't do this, Travis protested weakly. Watch me, Wyatt replied, and hung up. True to his word, Wyatt said about systematically dismantling Travis's life. He hired a private investigator to dig up every bit of dirt he could find on his brother. It didn't take long for the skeletons to come tumbling out of Travis's closet. Wyatt leaked information about Travis's affair to the fire department, ensuring his brother was fired for conduct unbecoming. He anonymously tipped off the local news about a drunk driving incident Travis had covered up years ago. He even went so far as to contact Travis's ex-girlfriends, encouraging them to come forward with any unsavory stories they might have. Within weeks, Travis's reputation was in tatters. He couldn't find work, couldn't show his face in public without being met with scorn and disgust. Wyatt watched it all unfold from afar, a cold sense of satisfaction settling in his chest. One evening, as Wyatt sat in his new apartment reviewing blueprints for a project, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Braden and Lily, looking scared and confused in what appeared to be a social services office. Below the photo was a message. Is this what you wanted, Wyatt? Are you happy now? Wyatt stared at the photo for a long moment, a mix of emotions swirling in his chest. For a brief second, he felt a pang of guilt. But then he remembered the lies, the betrayal, and his resolve hardened once more. He typed out a reply. They're your problem now, Travis. Better start being a real father. Weeks turned into months. Wyatt threw himself into his work, expanding his business and taking on bigger projects. He moved to Houston, eager for a fresh start away from the painful memories of Austin. One day, as he was reviewing plans in his new office, his assistant knocked on the door. Mr. O'Connor? There's an Elena on the phone for you. She says it's urgent. Wyatt's jaw clenched. Tell her I'm not available. The assistant hesitated. She sounds pretty desperate, sir. Something about the kids being in trouble. For a moment, Wyatt was tempted to pick up the phone. But then he remembered the years of lies, the betrayal, and his resolve hardened. I don't care. Tell her to never call here again. As the assistant left, Wyatt turned back to his work. His phone buzzed with a text, another plea from Elena. Without even reading it, he deleted the message. Months passed, and Wyatt's new life in Houston began to take shape. His business was thriving, and he'd even started dating again, casually, nothing serious. He told himself he was happy, that he'd moved on from the pain of his past. But sometimes, late at night, he'd find himself looking at old family photos, wondering about Braden and Lily. Were they okay? Did they hate him for abandoning them? He pushed these thoughts away, reminding himself that they were never truly his children to begin with. It was a crisp autumn morning, almost a year to the day since he'd discovered Elena's betrayal, when Wyatt received an unexpected visitor at his office. "Mr. O'Connor?" His assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "There's a Lauren Cortez here to see you. She says it's important." Wyatt frowned. He hadn't spoken to his divorce lawyer in months. "Send her in." Lauren looked much the same as she had during the divorce proceedings, but there was a gravity to her expression that gave Wyatt pause. "Lauren," he greeted her, gesturing for her to sit. "What brings you to Houston?" Lauren took a deep breath. "Wyatt, I know you asked me not to contact you about Elena or the children, but something's happened. I thought you should know." Wyatt's stomach clenched, but he kept his face impassive. "What is it?" "There was an accident," Lauren said softly. "Travis, he was driving drunk, with the kids in the car." Wyatt felt the blood drain from his face. "Are they?" "They're alive," Lauren quickly assured him. "But injured. Braden has a broken arm, and Lily, she's in critical condition. They're not sure if she'll make it." For a moment, Wyatt couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Where's Travis?" he finally managed to ask. "In custody," Lauren replied. "He's facing multiple charges: DUI, child endangerment, possibly vehicular manslaughter if." She trailed off, leaving the grim possibility unspoken. Wyatt stood abruptly, pacing the length of his office. "Why are you telling me this, Lauren? They're not my children. I made that very clear." Lauren's voice was gentle but firm. "Because regardless of biology, you raised those kids for 10 years, Wyatt. You were their father in every way that mattered. And right now, they need you." Wyatt stopped pacing, staring out the window at the Houston skyline. He thought of Braden's gap-toothed grin, of Lily's contagious giggle. He thought of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of first days of school and proud moments on the baseball field. And then he thought of the lies, the betrayal, the years of his life stolen by Elena and Travis's deception. When he turned back to Lauren, his face was set in hard lines. "I'm sorry they're hurt. Truly. But I meant what I said before. They're not my children, and they're not my responsibility." Lauren stood, disappointment clear in her eyes. "I understand. I just thought, well, I hope you might reconsider." As she reached the door, Wyatt spoke again. "Lauren, thank you for telling me. But please, don't contact me about them again." After Lauren left, Wyatt sat heavily in his chair, his head in his hands. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of everything he'd lost: his marriage, his family, his trust in the world. But then he straightened, pushing the emotions down deep inside him. He had a new life now, a successful business, a fresh start. He couldn't let the ghosts of his past drag him back down. Wyatt turned to his computer, pulling up the blueprints for his latest project. As he immersed himself in work, he pushed thoughts of Braden and Lily from his mind. They weren't his children. They had never been his children. And now, finally, they were out of his life for good. His phone buzzed with another message from Elena. Without even glancing at it, Wyatt deleted it, then blocked her number. He did the same for Travis and anyone else associated with his old life in Austin. As the sun set over Houston, Wyatt looked out at the city sprawled before him. This was his world now. Clean, uncomplicated, free from lies and betrayal. He told himself he was happy. And if sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep, he felt a hollow ache in his chest, well, that was a small price to pay for his freedom. Wyatt O'Connor had rebuilt his life from the ashes of betrayal. He was stronger now, colder perhaps, but unencumbered by the weight of false relationships. As he turned off his office lights and headed home, he felt a grim satisfaction. He had survived. He had won, and he would never allow himself to be hurt like that again.